And as far as I'm concerned, for the last year, Diesel's been walking around with my title.
I don't think Bret can defend himself any longer. What's he waiting for?
Well, the official wants Diesel to continue to wrestle. I don't know that's a wise decision. Who won? Wait a minute! I can't believe it!
He did it! He did it! He did it!
As I saw myself, not some corporate puppet that you decided to create, Vince.
Shawn, can you hear me? Pat. Pat Patterson, can you hear me?
Hello, my name is Bob Bamber and welcome to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast, going back in the time machine to November of 1995 for Volume 1 of this month's show. Volume 2 looks at WCW and World War III. Volume 3 is all your ECW action, including a review of the November to Remember show. But we're hearing Volume 1 for the WWF, looking in particular at Survivor Series. I'm being joined firstly by Kieran Mitchell.
Bob, how are you?
I'm very well, and Craig Wilson.
Hello all.
Craig, kicks off with the news.
Yep, so Bret Hart ended Diesel's long WWF title reign at Survivor Series, defeating the champion by roll-up after a lengthy match. Perhaps the most noteworthy part of the whole story was Diesel afterwards shouting "motherfucker" after Bret had surprised him with a roll-up to win the match. The following night on Raw, we saw a Diesel character with an edge, not seen since he'd won the title. Big Daddy Cool is back.
The most significant angle coming out of that Raw episode was the storyline collapse of Shawn Michaels mid-ring during a match with Owen Hart. After Michaels reprised his Royal Rumble spot, he returned to the ring, went to pose and then just fell to the mat with nobody in sight. The angle was presented as a shoot, so much so that even people who called the WWF offices the next day were told what happened was real. The angle was timed to coincide with Sting facing off against Hulk Hogan on WCW Monday Nitro.
On the television that followed, they played it up like Michaels may have been suffering post-concussion syndrome after the Syracuse attack last month, and that he may have returned to action too quickly, something that may have more truth to it than people think. And Michaels will be off television for a while, although given that current plans point to him against Bret Hart at WrestleMania, expect him to be back by the time Royal Rumble comes around.
Reports have been emerging backstage about the increasing power base of a group known as the Clique. It's said that there is an element of control surrounding Razor Ramon, Diesel, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Shawn Michaels and the 1-2-3 Kid. The incident in question involves Sid, who was previously promised the Intercontinental title from Razor Ramon. The title, it is said, will now be moving to Helmsley next. Of course, it should be remembered that Diesel lost the title this month.
Elsewhere at the Survivor Series, one interesting note was the result of the pre-match show where the Smoking Guns defeated ECW's Public Enemy, who had a tryout match that wasn't said to be anything special. The Body Donovas defeated the Underdogs, Aja Kong was the sole survivor in the women's match, Goldust defeated Bam Bam Bigelow, and The Undertaker cleaned house as his team won a clean sweep against the Royals, and in the wildcard match, Shawn Michaels, the British Bulldog and Ahmed Johnson were the survivors, with Johnson picking up the win on Yokozuna.
Vince McMahon met with talent at the beginning of November to address a number of issues, including falling morale and the reduction in B-show live events. It's said the cuts are impacting the entire roster, although understandably these are being felt more by guys towards the lower end of the roster. It's been reported that names like Jean-Pierre Lafitte, Karma and Bob Holly have all made complaints about lack of dates, and that Bam Bam Bigelow may end up leaving because of it.
The WWF will be raising the price of its In Your House pay-per-views from next month from $14.95 to $19.95. The story ran this month in the New York Post saying that federal prosecutors are investigating whether there was witness tampering during a steroid trial last year. And finally, the wildcard match-up at Survivor Series that mixed faces and heels was a Bill Watts idea, but nobody bothered to ask Watts what the storyline explanation for it was before he left. Despite this, they ran with it anyway.
And both individuals' career. No doubt about it. Somebody's going to go up, somebody's going to go down. One thing's for certain, neither one of these guys are going to be the same after this.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this Sunday. It all happens at the Survivor Series. And if you don't mind, Big D, let's start with you. How do you respond, Diesel, to the phraseology that Bret Hart is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be?
I think everybody in the World Wrestling Federation is entitled to their own opinion. I think Bret's, he's one of the best there has ever been, but right now Big Daddy Cool's kind of got a hold of that belt, and I think I'm pretty darn good.
So you think, of the two, obviously you're the best there is?
Right now, definitely.
And as it relates to the best there ever will be?
That's to be seen.
Bret Hart, how do you respond to the fact that many would say justifiably Big Daddy Cool Diesel is known as the leader of the new WWF generation?
Well, I don't know what that makes me then, Again, we're going back to a time, we go back to Survivor Series when I lost the World Wrestling Federation Championship belt to Bob Backlund. I've always had a problem with that. The fact that my mother, who was never, she was never designed or supposed to be at the ring to be an official in any way in that match. And I've always had a problem with the fact that I lost that title in the first place. And to me, I should have always been the champion from that point on. I don't think I really lost the title in a true sense. And when we had our big knockdown drag out at the Royal Rumble, again, you're talking about a situation where no winner was declared, and Diesel, went off with the World Wrestling Federation Championship belt, and I don't think he didn't beat me, and I don't think that anything was settled.
I jackknifed you.
Yeah, but that's
before there was interference.
You didn't pin me.
But with all due respect, Bret, neither did you beat him.
Well, for the same reason, but I don't think it's a coincidence that after that match, I don't doubt for a second that was the hardest match Diesel had. Of all the matches I've seen him have, I think that was the hardest fought, the toughest fought, and I didn't get a rematch after that. And
I don't remember him asking for one. And don't toot your own horn. Shawn Michaels gave me a run for my money too.
So in any event, it all comes down to this Sunday, gentlemen, and it just seems as though that the temperament here with both of you seem to be a bit on edge. And I wonder if there isn't a bit of professional jealousy involved here. Is there any professional jealousy, Bret Hart, with you as it relates to the current WWF champion Diesel?
None whatsoever. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Diesel. I think he's a great wrestler. I think that to have held the championship and defended the title for as long as he has for I think it's over a year now.
Just about a year.
Remarkable accomplishment. But I will say this much for Diesel, that in reference to Shawn Michaels, I think Diesel's done very well against big guys that are his size, but when it comes down to technical wrestling, that skilled technical type of wrestling, I think he just got by this much by Shawn Michaels, if that at all. And with me, I think it was the same thing. You're talking about technical wrestling, fast, skilled, and after 15 or 20 minutes, big guys tend to run out of steam, and that's where I come in. That's where I'm at my best, is at the 20-minute mark. And Diesel's he's a great champion, but I've noticed that, again, going to technical wrestlers, he's picked his opponents so that the technical ones aren't getting title shots. Well, I think that was the Bulldog's big.
A couple of notes from the introduction of Monday Night Raw on November the 6th. Firstly, they overlaid a clip of Ahmed Johnson body slamming Yokozuna, along with the comment that he became, quote, the stuff legends are made of. Quite the comment given the last person to body slam Yokozuna. The show also had a couple of clips from during the show itself as part of the introduction, showing to the audience that it wasn't live. During the opener between the British Bulldog and Marty Jannetty, we get a picture-in-picture with James E. Cornette's attorney, Clarence Mason. Mason said he sent a memorandum to WWF interim president Gorilla Monsoon, and as a result, at the December In Your House pay-per-view, Bulldog will face the winner and the champion of the Survivor Series title match. The fake Bill Clinton is back. He says WWF is one of America's best exports and he would be honoured to attend Survivor Series. We cut to Superstars. Bam Bigelow interrupts Goldust's introduction. He challenges him to a match. Goldust says his eyes are full of hate. So he sort of accepts those two will be facing off at the pay-per-view. After Henry O. Godwin won a squash match, Hunter Hearst Helmsley came out, pedigreed him on the floor, then doused him in slop. We get a promo from Diesel. He says he and Bret are facing off for the third time and we'll finally get to find out who's better. Todd Pettengill channels Mean Gene Okerlund and says you think it will be the best WWF Championship match ever. Shawn Michaels phones in during a Karma squash. He says he feels okay having got back in the ring during a house show match, but he says he's still feeling a bit disorientated. In the main event, we reprise the feud that will never end. Bret Hart teams for the Kushi to face Isaac Yankem, DDS and Jerry Lawler. Lawler grabs an actual chair, like a classroom chair, goes to strike Hart with it. The Barry Horowitz, who's at ringside because he's mates with the Kushi, grabs hold of the chair off of Lawler, but because the referee turned around at the exact moment, Lawler and Yankem are adjudged to have won the match by interference. We start off Raw on November the 13th with Henry O'Golwyn against Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Godwin decides to slop himself, which pops the crowd. Hunter, running away from the smell, ended up slipping on the slop before hightailing it up the entrance ramp. The match seemingly ends in a count-out. A video package airs promoting Shawn Michaels. He says he doesn't think being big makes you good. Quote, being good makes you good. He says he's the most entertaining performer in the WWF today. You can get the WWF calendar for 1996 with Diesel on the cover, all for the special price of $21 plus shipping. We have a sit-down interview with Diesel and Bret Hart in separate studios. They tease dissension between the two. Bret says Diesel hasn't beaten him before. Diesel quite rightly points out that Bret hasn't beaten him either. Bret calls Diesel a great wrestler and says that holding the title for such a long time, but he's done well against guys of his size. But when it comes to facing guys of the size of him and Shawn Michaels, Diesel has come unstuck. In the main event, the 1-2-3 Kid is refereeing a non-title match between Razor Ramon and Sid. Dean Douglas walks out and being matched in a scouting mission. He then attacks Razor with the Kid distracted. Razor later sets up Sid for the Razor's Edge, but Kid pulls Sid off of Razor's back. Sid hits a powerbomb and Kid does a fast count. So Sid wins the match and the Kid turns. DiBiase shoves a $5 bill into Razor's mouth before the Kid takes the money out. It seems like the Kid has been bought. The show goes off the air with Razor attempting to start a fight with Douglas in the back.
You know, when I won the World Wrestling Federation Championship, I'd said at that time I'd take on anybody. And the first person I took on was Bret Hart. I mean, if I was trying to dodge a technical wrestler, the last person I would want to get in the ring with would be Bret Hart. I don't see me dodging anybody. I wrestled Shawn Michaels. I wrestled Owen Hart. I wrestled anybody and everybody that wanted to come along.
All right, so we come to this rematch now. This is the third time, the rubber match, if you would. There's no time limit. There's no disqualification. There's no count-out. Will Big Daddy Cool survive the Survivor Series as the WWF champion? And if you will, how do you think you will?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go with my strengths. I mean, I don't get paid by the hour around here, so I'm going to try to knock him out and knock him out quickly. I mean, I'm going to use my power. I'm going to use my size. I'm going to use my leverage. I mean, I'm not going out there to win on points in some kind of collegiate wrestling match. I mean, I'm going out to do what Big Daddy Cool does best. That's beat people up, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
And Bret, with a no disqualification provision, although it seemed that you were the aggressor in the second match, to a certain extent, more than Diesel was, but doesn't this concern you that if things get ugly, if things get nasty, aren't you concerned about what a man that's over 7 feet, over 300 pounds can do to you?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't doubt for a second that this is going to be one of the hardest fought matches I've ever had. And, you know, based on the last two, I mean, the first one was a knockdown drag-out, and the second one was a knockdown drag-out. And basically, the second match, you know, I applied the same medicine that was given to me in the first match, and nothing's been settled in either battle. And you know, I think my strengths are that I gotta take this match as far as I can. I gotta try to wear Diesel down, which is no easy task. And I think I've got certain strategies that I tried in the first and the second match with Diesel. And you know, it's really hard to come up with something different because he's kind of caught on to whatever strategies I've got. But I've always got tricks up my sleeve. And the one thing about the Hitman is that the Hitman sort of like a Timex watch. You know, I take a licking, but I keep on ticking. And the more time that goes in this match, the more trouble Diesel's going to be in.
And let's talk about the experience factor to Big Daddy Cool Diesel. You have been on a skyrocket, if you would, in your career here in the World Wrestling Federation, and all the way up to winning the World Wrestling Federation title, and now you possess that accolade for almost a year now. In terms of momentum, in terms of your ambitions, tell us what you feel you can give the World Wrestling Federation with a victory over Bret Hart. Well, what does that mean to you if, in fact, that happens?
I mean, Bret Hart has been here for 10 years. I mean, he's been a cornerstone of the World Wrestling Federation. He's been the epitome of a true professional, of a true champion. 2 times, in my estimation, I've jackknifed him, and 2 times there's been outside interference that has hindered me from making the cover. I mean, the question lies in my mind, can I beat this man? You know, I'm not going to sit over and say that he hasn't given me 2 dog fights, we haven't been through 2 wars. I'm not going to say that because it's been a war. It's going to be one again. The thing is, I'm bigger, stronger, and smarter than I was in January.
All right, Bret, one final question to you. You've done it all. You've done it all twice. 2-time WWF Tag Team Champion, Intercontinental Champion, World Wrestling Federation Champion. What makes Bret Hart tick? Why does Bret Hart reach for this brass ring, if you would, one more time? Is it the money? Is it the glory? What is it, Bret? What's driving you?
It's certainly not the money. And I think what it really comes down to, there's a certain point in your life where your memories, you know, they become more important than your dreams. And there's a certain time when you reach that, and I haven't reached that yet. And last year I was interrupted with my World Wrestling Federation Championship reign. It was interrupted, and I got 1 title shot. No winner was declared. And as far as I'm concerned, for the last year, Diesel's been walking around with my title, my championship belt. And it's time to find out who is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
Well, gentlemen, it is all about memories. It is all about dreams and about ambition. The best of luck to both of you this Sunday night.
And we jump straight into Survivor Series review. Craig, you can kick us off with the results.
Of course, in the opening bout, the Body Donnas of Skip, Rad Radford, Zip and the 1-2-3 Kid, with Sonny and Ted DiBiase in the corner, defeated the underdogs of Marty Jannetty, Hakushi, Barry Horowitz and Bob Holly, with the 1-2-3 Kid surviving. The next matchup saw Bertha Faye, Aja Kong, Tomoka Watanabe and Lioness Asuka, with Harvey Whippleman defeating Alundra Blaze, Kyoko Anu, Saki Hasagua and Shaparita Asari, with Aja Kong surviving. Goldust then defeated Bam Bam Bigelow in a singles match. The Dark Side of the Undertaker, Savio Vega, Fatu and Henry Godwin with Paul Bearer defeated the Royals team of King, Mabel, Jerry Lawler, Isaac Yankum DDS and Hunter Hearst Helmsley with Sir Mo, with the entirety of the Dark Side team surviving. Then we had Team Michaels of Shawn Michaels, Ahmed Johnston, the British Bulldog and Psycho Sid with DiBiase and Jim Cornette defeating Team Yokozuna of Yoko, Owen Hart, Razor Ramon and Dean Douglas with Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette with HBK, Ahmed and the Bulldog surviving. And in the main event, Bret Hart defeated WWF champion Diesel to win the title in a no DQ match that ran for nearly 25 minutes.
Kieran, what do you think of this show?
I actually thought it was really good. I actually thought there was, we'll get into, like I said, each match as it comes, but I actually found quite a lot to take from this, more so than some of the recent stuff we've been reviewing. So, if I was to say overall, I say I really enjoyed this show, really enjoyed it.
Great.
It's by a country mile the best show from the WWF in 1995, certainly so far in my opinion, and any match that wasn't at least good was at least interesting.
Well, I debating this with Stuart Brooks of the New Generation podcast, project podcast, sorry, and I kind of, he said to me that he thought this was the best show of the year like you did, and I kind of thought, I thought SummerSlam was better. Not that we're here to compare shows, and probably do that at the end. But I think in terms of this was a solidly booked show with good action that featured nothing bad on it, which brings it above about half of the WWF pay-per-views this year off the bat. But yeah, it didn't. Nothing on this show really grabbed my attention. Nothing blew me away. And the main event. It was the one Bret Hart Diesel match to feature a clean finish, and yet I'd probably argue it was their worst match of the 3 that they've had. Not to say that it was bad, but we will come to that really as we come to each match. We open the show with Mr. Perfect being introduced. He's joining Vince McMahon and Jim Ross on commentary. And we jump straight into the first match. It's Marty Jannetty, Hakushi, Barry Horowitz and Bob Holly versus Body Don Skip with Sonny, Rad Radford, Dr. Tom Pritchard and the 1-2-3 Kid with Ted DiBiase. Razor Ramon comes out trying to get at the Kid, who's freshly turned heel. They're held back and Razor is sent backstage. We start off with Pritchard and Jannetty. Jannetty goes swinging in the corner of the heels and clears them to ringside. Holly powerbombs Radford, then hits a body slam into an arm drag. Hakushi charges at Radford, who turns it into a lovely spine buster. Radford tags in the 1-2-3 Kid, who gets a lot of boos. The Kid goes for the biggest heel move in the book, a splash from the top. Skip goes for a backdrop from the second rope, but Hakushi reverses it into a crossbody. The crowd get a Barry chant going. Pritchard hits a gut wrench powerbomb on Holly, then misses a moonsault from the top. Holly goes for a crossbody from the top and pins Pritchard. Skip then rolls up Holly, and it's 3 against 3. Hakushi goes for a Vader bomb, but Skip gets his knees up. Skip goes for a Frankensteiner from the top, then collapses. The crowd start another Barry chant. Hakushi hits a springboard back elbow onto the Kid. The crowd are going nuts. Hakushi goes for the top, levels Kid with a shoulder tackle, but can only get a 2 count. Hakushi goes for a springboard splash, but the Kid moves out of the way. We go to a picture-in-picture of Razor Ramon watching backstage with Vader, Fatu and Henry Godwin. Kid levels Hakushi with a roundhouse kick to the back of the head. Radford pins Hakushi with a handful of tights. Horowitz gets into the ring with Kid. Skip tells Radford not to pin Horowitz. He wants the win for himself. Radford hits a Northern Light suplex for a 2, then starts doing some push-ups. He wants to be a body donor, is what they're kind of telling you. Horowitz capitalises on the showboating and rolls up Radford. It's 2-on-2. Horowitz is taking on Skip. Barry hits a lovely elbow, then a running knee. Kid knees Horowitz in the back and pins him. The crowd rally behind the sole remaining babyface in Marty Jannetty. Skip charges at Jannetty and crotches himself on the middle turnbuckle. Skip goes for a powerbomb, but Jannetty rolls through a sunset flip and almost gets a pin. Jannetty hits a rocker dropper. Mr. Perfect says on commentary, well, that'll break your neck. A reference to the Chuck Austin story from last year. Well, no, 93 actually, sorry. So he knocks Jannetty off with his footing on the top, but Jannetty regains his composure, hits a lovely powerbomb from the top and pins Skip. We're down to Jannetty against Kid. The Kid drops a leg from the top rope, but Jannetty kicks out. Kid goes for a cannonball from the top, but Jannetty moves. Jannetty hits a drop kick for a 2. We cut to the R-way and out comes Psycho Sid. The crowd start a Razor chant. Jannetty hits a rocker dropper on the Kid. Jannetty pauses a little too much and the Kid gets his foot on the ropes. Diesel distracts the referee. Sid snaps Jannetty's neck off the ropes and the Kid pins Jannetty as the sole survivor. Craig?
I think this match is excellent. I mean, you look at the teams and it's severely lacking in star power, and because of that, with 1-2-3 Kid recently turning heel, it's kind of obvious that it's going to be him that's the sole survivor here. But there's some great action over the course of 20 minutes. I mean, you could probably argue it's a bit of a throwaway match in some respects, but there's a little bit of storyline development here, and all in all, it's just a nice sort of 20-minute opening of a show match. Yeah, I really like this one.
Kieran?
Yeah, it's the same really. Like I said, you might look at the sort of the lineup before the match and you'll go, well, I'm not going to really expect a lot. So I kind of went in thinking it's not going to be anything amazing. But I thought, like Craig, it sort of did its job. It's totally freshened up the 1-2-3 Kid for me. He seemed to get some decent heat. Jannetty seems to be over. They're obviously setting up something there. And like the highlight was that top rope powerbomb, which I just thought was absolutely fantastic. So all in all, I thought, wasn't expecting a lot, and what I got was a lot better than what I expected. So I really enjoyed this match as well.
Yeah, this isn't the first time that we've seen a Survivor Series open with kind of just groups of guys that we don't really have any place on the spot for, but that's not necessarily the worst thing, and we'll see this as we get to other matches later on, in that because there's no theme to these teams and because there's nobody they're particularly interested in trying to protect, they just put a team of babyfaces against a team of heels, and they let them wrestle the match. And there's no interest in trying to protect anyone. There's no interest in trying to, oh God, we've got a pay-per-view coming up, so he can't be pinned or anything like that. We're not trying to do anything like that. So we just end up with a really good 4-on-4 match. And I think it speaks a lot that, you know, the Kid had turned 6 days before. And he was getting those kind of reactions. I mean, because I remember when they started this match, and obviously, you can show what happened on, you can show people in the arena what happened maybe, on the big screen or to the kid on Monday to remind them what had happened. But 6 days after his turn, and the crowd are already giving him some quite vociferous booing. And then on the other side, you've got Barry Horowitz, who's turning into this unlikely hero in terms of, as we kind of come back to what happened at SummerSlam. And Craig, I think the crowd helped this match a lot, because I think in another arena this match might have, I wouldn't say died a death, the action was solid, but I think this could have been a very different match had the crowd not have gone with it.
Oh, absolutely. But in fairness to the guys in the match, they did everything they could to get the crowd on side, and I have to agree with the earlier point, the standout moment was certainly Matty Jannetty's top rope powerbomb. Craig,
what do you think of the kid's heel turn?
I think the character needed freshened up. The fact that he was able to transition from being a bland babyface to a heel that's getting such a reaction shows that the crowd are behind the change as well. So it's obvious from the fact that he was a survivor that they've certainly got plans from. So it'll be certainly interesting to see where they go with him.
Kieran, same question?
Yeah, like I said in my initial review, I said it just totally freshens the character up. It's now going to be about who they put him with. I think what they might do, or what I hope they might do, is kind of have him as like that, how they sort of finish this match, where he's sort of going to get a lot of help, and he's going to get some really cheap wins, maybe some distraction roll-up type things, and do that before they put him in like a full-fledged match. But I really like to see where they're going to take this character now, and like I said, it's freshened everything up for him, I think.
Kieran, any danger that a guy of his ability is going to have to significantly change his wrestling style to fit being a heel?
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't want them, Bob, to sort of rely too much on the distraction kind of things, because it is a good way of getting cheap heat, is to have him sort of maybe not sort of fumble through a match, but wrestle a certain way through a match, then get like a distraction. But when he's out there on his own, I just don't know how that's going to go, if I'm honest. I don't know if he's actually got it in him to wrestle that kind of way, which is, I think, what you're alluding to.
I'll end it by saying that at least finally we've got an actual dividing line between the feud between him and Razor, rather than this this hyper-extended program where they kind of half turn on each other every 2.5 weeks, and they reunite, and they turn, and they reunite. It's like, okay, we've got a dividing line now. I mean, I think I'd turn Razor, but one for another day. We cut backstage to see Razor running amok in the dressing room, launching TV monitors across the room. We're then backstage with Todd Pettengill, Owen Hart, Yokozuna, Jim Cornette, Mr. Fuji, and Dean Douglas. We get promos from all the teammates and Cornette. Back out, it's Alundra Blaze, Kyoko Inui, Saki Hasegawa and Chapirita Asari versus Bertha Faye, Aja Kong, Tomoko Watanabe and Lioness Asuka with Harvey Whippleman. Vince McMahon hands over to Jim Ross for the call. Asuka puts Asari in the giant swing. She pushes out of a pin. Asari hits a Sky Twister splash for a 2. Blaze tags in. Blaze hits a German suplex and pins Asuka. Blaze flies to the outside from the top and hits Watanabe. Hasegawa hits multiple suplexes on Watanabe. Watanabe then counters for hitting 2 sit-out splashes. Hasegawa then hits a lovely pair of T-bone suplexes on Aja Kong. Kong hits one of her own and pins Hasegawa. Kong then hits a second rope splash on Asuka and pins her as well. Inui gets in and runs over Kong with a clothesline. Inui goes out of a sunset flip, but Kong sits on her for the pin. It's 3-on-1 against Alundra Blaze. The trio simultaneously climb to the ring. Blaze tries to fight them all off before taking on Watanabe. Blaze then seems to give up on the pin before hitting a pile driver to pin Watanabe. Faye gets in against Blaze. Faye bumps into Kong. Blaze goes for an ambitious German suplex and just about pulls it off to eliminate Faye. It's 1 against 1. Kong goes for a butt attack in the corner. Blaze hits a Frankensteiner for a 2, then a standing moonsault. Kong runs over to Blaze while hitting a spinning slap, and it's all over. Kong is the sole survivor. She signals that she wants the title. Kieran?
Again, not expecting much, but that's probably because I wasn't really up on who, a lot of the women wrestlers were in the match. But again, it was just really good, fresh stuff. It seems to be that they're really moving, like the way they're booking the matches. It might have something to do with the fact that you know, it is a Survivor Series match, so you're going to get stuff you're not going to get in no other pay-per-views. But again, everything feels really fresh. It's obviously been booked around getting Aja Kong ready to go up against Blaze. So I thought they set that up quite well. And again, I just really enjoyed the ring work.
Great.
Yeah, this was nothing like you would sort of normally expect from North American women's wrestling, is it? The impact that the Japanese performers had in this is massive. Just the sort of move set that they brought to the table compared to the sort of traditional style that we see on pay-per-views featuring WWF women wrestlers. I thought this was very good. I mean, typically it didn't get all that much time, so it kind of suffered as a result because of the sort of quick-fire eliminations, but I guess that's sort of more a reflection on Vince McMahon's thoughts on women's wrestling rather than the ability of those in the match.
Yeah, as we kind of covered, six women here who haven't been exposed to WWF television before, which, you know, show from the crowd reaction. I think that's certain to say. Trying to get in 7 eliminations in however long this match was. It kind of been more than 7 or 8 minutes. You know, it felt a bit rushed. There were also, I think, more than one kind of incorrect pin. There were a couple of eliminations that weren't supposed to be. The ref counted 3, I think it was Hasegawa, and then I want to say Inui, I think were the 2 that weren't exactly planned as they were planned, but I think the bit with the 3-on-1 set up quite nicely. And yeah, it kind of comes back to what I said earlier in that this is, the action was good, the crowd weren't really into it, but it's like, you wanted to get out of here setting up Aja Kong for a match with Ronda Blaze. So Blaze gets in a 3-on-1 situation, eliminates Aja Kong's 2 teammates, and then Kong pins it. It's booking 101, I would say. I mean, Craig, but I think, Craig, if they're going to do this more often, they're going to have to give a bit more exposure to the women, because, I mean, I'm watching all these Raws, and it's not even the Japanese women. We barely even see Alundra Blaze.
No, that's it exactly. There's just sort of not on TV, then they get 10 minutes on a pay-per-view, and people in the back are probably wondering why the fans don't really care about women's wrestling. That's the sort of the answer right there, and I can't envisage Alundra Blaze, after the type of women she's been wrestling in recent years, will be that enamoured by the prospect of facing off against Aja Kong, who has a significantly stiffer style than she's certainly going to be used to.
Yeah, indeed. Todd Pettengill is in the crowd with fake Bill Clinton. He claims he's been watching Bam Bam Bigelow quotes since he was a little boy. Bam Bam's pyro goes off mid-ring and Clinton's security take him down, assuming he's been shot. He's obviously fine. Goldust's entrance takes so long that his theme song restarts. It's Bam Bam Bigelow against Goldust. Bam Bam goes for a big right, but Goldust slides out of the ring and takes a deep breath in. Goldust slaps Bam Bam. Bam Bam levels in with the right hand. Goldust goes for a big right on the outside, but Bam Bam ducks and hits the ring post hard. Back in the ring, Goldust hits a big clothesline over the top to the outside. After a flurry of offense, Bam Bam then rallies with a back suplex, but goes for a standing headbutt. Goldust moves out of the way. Goldust gets back to work. Bigelow rallies out of a camel clutch type move into an impressive electric chair drop. Bam Bam rallies with some rights, and Goldust barely kicks out. Bam Bam misses a running headbutt. Goldust bounces off the far ropes into a running bulldog and wins the match. They're calling this an upset on commentary. Craig?
Not really sort of much in this for me, to be honest. I'm not really sold by the Goldust character. There doesn't seem to be too much about it other than him being a little bit weird. And we've discussed previously the sort of dwindling importance in the eyes of the WWF of Bam Bam Bigelow. This sort of reeked of Bam Bam Bigelow's finale to me.
Kieran?
This is easily the lowest point of the card for me. Mainly a couple of reasons. The Goldust entrance. Good God. When I know when an entrance is too long is when I'm A, looking at my clock, looking at the time, and then B, when the theme music starts around for the second time. He just seemed to take an age to get down to the ring, and then when they started, before that I didn't even like Bam Bam's entrance because I hated seeing him as a face. When you got somebody that looks like Bam Bam and he's clapping along to his music with the crowd.
Oh God, it looks awful, doesn't it?
Oh, he looks so uncomfortable. Do you know what it was? It actually made me cringe. I was just like, what an absolute. And we'll get on to Bam Bam later. But what a waste that is. And like I said, there wasn't much in the match. It was it took ages to beat Bam Bam down, and it was just, easily the lowest point, Bob, easily.
Bam Bam comes across as a big teddy bear, which really isn't like...
Oh, God.
It's really not the connotations you want from a guy of that size and a guy
He's
of
got
that...
flames on his head. Come on.
Yeah, right. It really shouldn't be that difficult. Yeah, it's an incredibly demotivated Bam Bam Bigelow up against Dustin Rhodes, who, if I'm being polite, is still feeling out a new character. If I'm in the interest of protecting him and not kind of calling this out for how weak it all is. But yeah, this was just like again, Craig, you talk about Bam Bam going like if he doesn't care this much, I'd rather he left, and it's an incredible fall from a guy who, 7 months ago was headlining WrestleMania, and we'll kind of touch on that in the second half of the show. But yeah, this match didn't work. It's like there's, the Goldust character hasn't been fleshed out enough, and it's so different to anything normal that I think the crowd are still trying to work out what to think of it. And yeah, Bam Bam just doesn't care, and the action's not great either. That's the kicker. Bob Backlund joins Bill Clinton in the presidential box. Backlund demands to be addressed as Mr. Backlund. Clinton urges Backlund to throw his hat into the presidential ring. Next up, it's the Royal Team of Jerry Lawler, Isaac Yankem, King Mabel and Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus the Dark Side of Savio Vega, Fatu, Henry O. Godwin and The Undertaker with Paul Bearer. The crowd pops big for the introduction of The Undertaker. Undertaker is wearing a white mask covering the upper half of his face. Craig, he looked scary here.
He does, it's very creepy. Undoubtedly very creepy indeed.
I would keep this mask, cause, yeah, like...
A bit Phantom of the Opera.
It is. It works. For those who didn't hear last month's show, Undertaker's got a broken orbital bone, which is a bone in his eye. So yeah, he's wearing the mask to protect his face. Mabel looks petrified, and rightly so. He's sporting a mohawk. Undertaker is sizing up his teammates. Fatu shakes hands with Vega and Godwin, but thinks better of it with Taker. Fatu and Helmsley get things going. Hunter sets up for the pedigree, but Fatu fights out of it. Helmsley wants a piece of the Undertaker. Lawler tags in. He's wearing a fascinating gold singlet. Lawler immediately tags back out. Godwin hits Yankem with a hip toss, a body slam, then a running elbow. Helmsley tags in and hits some uppercuts, and the crowd start a large Burger King chant. Godwin holds Hunter over his head, shakes the throw into the outside, but the ref stops him. Both men tag, and it's Lawler against Vega. Lawler mocks Vega's dancing. Vega levels him with a right. Lawler fires Fatu into Yankem's knee. Yankem tags in. Yankem slingshots Mabel towards Fatu. Fatu moves and Mabel eats some turnbuckle. Vega fires off the ropes and runs into a big slam by Mabel. Mabel goes over a lovely double arm suplex, sending Vega flying across the ring. Hunter rounds Vega into Mabel before tagging in Lawler. Still no eliminations thus far. Lawler hits a big pile driver on Vega, stalls, and Vega manages to kick out. Vega starts flaying at all comers in the heel corner before slamming Undertaker. Lawler hits another pile driver, but Vega pops up and tags in Undertaker. King wants to tag anyone, but the heels retreat. Undertaker holds up Lawler before dropping him. Still nobody wants to tag. Lawler walks into a tombstone and is eliminated by the Undertaker. Yankem goes for a right arm, but Undertaker ducks, fires off the far ropes, and it's a lovely flying tackle. Undertaker tombstones Yankem, and it's 4-on-2. Helmsley comes into the ring before retreating. He goes up the R-way, but gets stopped by Godwin carrying a slot bucket. Undertaker chokeslams Hunter from the apron into the ring, and we're down to 1. Mabel hits a big belly-to-belly on Undertaker, who spark out. Mabel drops the leg, but when Mabel starts mocking Vega's dancing, Undertaker sits up. Mabel legs it incredibly quickly up the R-way. He gets counted out. Undertaker chokeslams Mo for good manager, and the Dark Side win 4-0. Kieran.
I kind of understood why they did it. It was, to me, it was quite a boring match. But I kind of understood why they did it, so I'm not going to be too hard, because obviously if Undertaker's been gone for, how long was he gone off TV?
Oh, not that long. 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay.
And technically he hasn't wrestled since SummerSlam.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was on the In Your House 3 card, just not on the show. He did one of the dark matches, I think. Then he got injured.
Oh, okay. But I kind of see this match as a way of they've got to sort of build him back up, and they probably thought maybe with what's going on with the roster at the minute, they have to do it quite quickly. This obviously is a perfect way to make one guy look really strong. So I'm not going to be too hard on this match because like with some of the other previous matches we've just talked about, it kind of did its job and got Undertaker over. Mabel's scared of him, runs off, and then he just completely decimates the other team. So while it wasn't the best match in the world, I thought it was pretty decent.
Craig?
Yeah, I'd agree with Kieran. It's certainly pretty boring, and the weakest of the 3 Survivor Series matches on this show, but it serves a very solid purpose in terms of storyline development and makes The Undertaker look incredibly strong.
Yeah, it's the Diesel build from last year's Survivor Series, isn't it? It's 10 minutes of no eliminations. You tag in the guy you want to get over, he cleans house, and the match ends. You're right to call out the early action being slow, but when you look at the guys involved in the match, it wasn't going to be any different. Lawler, Yankem, Mabel, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Savio Vega, Fatu, and Henry O. Godwin. Don't hold your breath for any exciting action on that front. As you say, it was job done. This is the kind of match where they set out to achieve one goal, which was to make The Undertaker look strong, and they did. We get promos from Bret, who's not focusing on Bulldog at In Your House 5 yet. Bret says he's worried about the upcoming match. He compares himself to Wayne Gretzky, says he has to ask himself if he's still the best. Tonight, he will find out. Diesel says he agrees that a long match favours Bret, but he's here to do a high impact power moves and do it quickly. We're backstage with Jim Cornette, who's here with the Bulldog on this side of the wildcard match. Cornette denies ever being interviewed earlier. We're here with Sid, Shawn and Ahmed Johnson. And we move on, and I've just seen the length of my match review for this. Take a deep breath in. It's Yokozuna, Owen Hart, Dean Douglas and Razor Ramon with Mr. Fuji versus Sid, Bulldog, Shawn Michaels and Ahmed Johnson with Jim Cornette and Ted DiBiase. The crowd go nuts for Shawn, particularly the females. Both teams attempt to assemble the strategy. We're starting with Shawn and Owen. The pace is fast. Michaels does his rumble spot and manages to head scissor Owen over the top. Michaels grabs Cornette's tennis racket and nails him with it. Back in the ring, Owen fires Shawn off of the ropes, hits a belly to belly. Douglas suplexes Michaels. Michaels fires him off of opposing turnbuckles, then hits a forearm. Douglas goes to the second rope for a Vader bomb, but Michaels moves. Michaels hits a moonsault, but Owen pulls Michaels off the pin. In comes Ahmed Johnson, who hits a couple of scissor kicks for attempting to body slam Yokozuna, but failing. Douglas puts Johnson in a rest hold, then goes members of the opposing team. With the referee distracted, Douglas holds up Johnson in the corner, and Razor takes the opportunity to get a couple of illegal strikes in. Johnson power slams Douglas before throwing Michaels into Douglas for a 2 count. Razor attempts to help Douglas on the outside, but Douglas lays in a strike. Douglas rolls up Shawn, but Shawn kicks himself off. Razor nails teammate Douglas with the right hand. Shawn rolls him up for the first elimination. It's brothers-in-law, Owen and Bulldog, up next. They go to shake hands, then both hit each other with rights. Owen hits a spinning back kick. Bulldog tags Shawn. Owen tags Razor. JR says, quote, "I don't think they can wrestle each other without a ladder." Razor motions towards the sky. There's no title up there, gents. Razor levels Michaels, but gets thrown to the outside. He returns and levels him again, but Shawn takes him down with an elbow. Shawn ducks as Razor charges him. Razor stops and attempts a Razor's edge, which he hits, but Ahmed Johnson breaks it up. Razor and Shawn butt heads in the middle of the ring, and they're both down. Shawn jumps and tags in Sid. Sid battles Razor before they both hit the mat with a double clothesline. Razor sends Sid off the top for a near fall. Sid hits Razor with a one-arm clothesline, then signals for the powerbomb, but tags in Shawn instead. Michaels shapes for a switch in music, but Razor ducks and Shawn nails Sid. Shawn looks nonplussed. Bulldog jumps in, attempts to break up the pin, but misses, and Razor eliminates Sid. Sid powerbombs Michaels for good measure. It's 3-on-3. Razor eventually goes to pin Shawn, who kicks out. Owen hits a back body drop onto Michaels. Owen tags in Yokozuna, who fires Michaels into the turnbuckle. Yoko locks in a long nerve hold. Owen goes for a big diving headbutt, but Shawn moves. Johnson tags in and unloads on Owen, Razor and Yoko. Johnson hits the Tiger Bomb on Owen and eliminates him. Razor bulldogs Johnson, then lays into Shawn and Bulldog. Johnson hits a spine buster. Ahmed poses on the first rope. Razor takes advantage and hits a Razor's edge, but Bulldog breaks it up and starts laying into Razor. Outwalk DiBiase, Sid and the Kid. Razor hits full away slam on Bulldog for a 2. Kid distracts Razor. Bulldog hits a running power slam, and it's 3-on-1. Shawn starts rocking Yokozuna, whose flailing arms make for quite the visual. Yoko then lays out Shawn and drops the leg. Yoko sets for a bonsai drop, but Shawn moves. Johnson tags in and just about hits a body slam on Yokozuna. Border breaks up the pin before getting thrown over the top. Michael super kicks Yokozuna. Armour Johnson hits a big splash for the win, and Bulldog and Cornette celebrate, which annoys the faces. I'll take a deep breath in. Craig.
I think this match certainly improved greatly by the sort of heel face stuff. I don't think it'd be anywhere near as good if it wasn't for that. But yeah, no, I thought this was fine. Maybe a sort of 6 out of 10 sort of caliber match. Yeah, it was good enough.
Kieran?
Yeah, again, I love the fact that there's mixtures of faces and heels on both teams. It was a bit unbalanced, probably because Razor was the only face on his team? I can't think now.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, so it was quite good. The action was quite good, is when he's trying to break up the pins of the faces on the other team. So, I mean, obviously we don't know how it would have gone if it was just a straight match. That action probably wouldn't have been as good, and it was the fact that it was like the wild card match which sort of put it over. And I thought this was probably the. I think I enjoyed this out of all the elimination match type matches. I think I enjoyed this one the most. I really like this match.
The action was good. It was an interesting dynamic to see, heels and faces mixed up on either side. It was kind of quite nice at points to see Razor kind of almost being a heel, just because he was like, well, yeah, look, the guys in the corner, I might as well attack him, even if the referee's back his turn. But I kind of found this match quite hard to follow. It's like when you've got two teams that are just jumbled together, and yet you've also got heels on some sides and faces on the other. It's like, I keep having to consult the initial match back to kind of compute what happened. You've got Razor interfering, kind of lays out Douglas, because you remember Douglas is on Shawn's side. In fact, he's not. Douglas is on Razor's side, and, Shawn picks up the win, and you got the bit later on with Sid, powerbombing Shawn, even though they're on the same kind of side. It wasn't an easy match to follow, and it was one of those things, like, Craig, it just about works, I think, because there was so much, I won't say star power, but so many known names in the match, but it barely worked.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think I gave it a 6, so it's just above pass marks, but I think a lot of that is to do with the novelty factor, and we've not mentioned it yet, but seeing the British Bulldog celebrate with his teammates afterwards was quite funny as well. Yeah. But yeah, I think just for it to be a little bit different, sort of just changing things up a little bit, made this quite interesting. But as we alluded to in the news section, there was no sort of further storyline aspect to this, because we don't know what the WWF didn't know what the further storyline was to be, because Bill Watts had left.
Yeah, like there was. This is probably my other criticism. There was nothing on this match going in, and there was nothing on this match going out. Like, there was no reason for these teams to be teaming alongside each other, because they didn't bother to explain it because they didn't know why. And there was nothing riding on this match. Like, I don't know what you could have done, but like, if you want to get really creative, maybe the survivor or survivors could have faced off against Bret in Your House 5. I know they kind of promised Bulldog that spot, but that's the way you could have like created a bit of extra intrigue on the match. It didn't click. The action was good. There's some good names in there. There's some good individual moments. When Owen's in the match, it got really good. I'm a big fan of Yokozuna. Him and Shawn is a singles match waiting to happen, I think. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. Kieran, one further thing we haven't really touched on yet is Ahmed Johnson. It seems like they're giving him a big push. I mean, they brought him in. He's been pretty dominant. He's a guy of big size. And I think not only him being a survivor on the winning team, but him picking up the victory alongside Shawn Michaels of all people, I think says something.
Yeah, you can sort of see how they're going to position him for something like really big. I mean, he's already got sort of that side that he's sort of like the type, for want of a better word, that Vince McMahon likes to push. I'm still not completely sold. I like all his high impact stuff, but is there anything other beyond that? And then there's also, I'd like to see more promos from him, but I wouldn't be adverse to sort of keeping him as just like this silent ass kicker type character. I think that would really work as well. And then who they're going to put him up against, but I can see he's got a big future. I think he's going to have a really good future.
Yeah, well, he's, as we'll hear in a bit, he's being moved into a program with Dean Douglas for people. Craig, same question on Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, as has been mentioned, the size aspect is certainly going to get him noticed, but his attack is sort of quite different, quite a sort of different move set in place. He's got a savage looking attack as well. Some of the sort of moves, especially the sort of like, I don't know, I think just some of the mannerisms remind me a little bit of the Barbarian solo run in the WWF at the start of the 90s. I sort of thought he was a little bit different to the usual around him, but that never went anywhere, so I'm sure Johnson's hoping that that's where the similarity ends.
President Clinton is being fed popcorn by Alundra Blaze, who already put some popcorn down her cleavage, some porn innuendo later, and the segment ends. We cut to video preview. Go on, Craig.
It's sunny.
Was it sunny? What did I say?
Alundra Blaze.
Oh, actually, I thought it was my mistake. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now. Now you kind of think of it. It did seem odd that I thought that was Alundra Blaze.
Bill Clinton's having sunny days.
Ah, there we go. Craig, what do you think of these segments? I mean, we've had I think it was WrestleMania 10 where we had the fake Bill Clinton. I don't know. Like, what's the point?
I think you've just answered the question. I've not really got much else to add to that. It just doesn't. The one with Bob Backlund earlier on had a joke about government employees that Vince McMahon then had to explain. So you're like, well, if Vince McMahon's having to then explain the joke, it's clearly not a great joke. So what is the point of all of this?
Oh God,
Kieran,
a joke doesn't really.
Political humour.
You go to all that trouble of getting this Bill Clinton lookalike. You set them all up with the script and all of this, and then you have to explain the joke anyway. Just don't bother. Just don't bother. Give a match. Make the women's match another.
Well, I mean, none of these segments are that long. You got to have a bit of a gap between matches. I mean, it's this or Doc Hendricks and Pettingill backstage. Right. So you win some, you lose some. But yeah,
Clinton sounded more appealing than Todd Pettingill and Doc Hendricks.
Well, yeah, I suppose. Anyway, yes, no, you are correct. It was sunny, not Alundra Blaze. We cut to video preview with some comments from Diesel and Bret from Raw. We might as well discuss that bit now, actually. We heard the entirety of that promo kind of splice between the TV review before we start reviewing the show itself. Craig, you've seen this clip. What do you think of it?
I thought it was good. It's a sort of very different to wrestlers standing with Todd Pettingill or Doc Hendricks and going through the usual sound bites of I'm the best there is, best there was, best there ever will be, yada yada. It sort of opened them up. They were both opened up a wee bit more in the interview. They refer to sort of having respect for each other. They admit to weaknesses as well. Diesel says he doesn't particularly want to face a technical wrestler, whilst Bret admits that it'll be hard to wear him down. There's just a sort of honesty that you don't normally see that sort of makes it feel a little bit more like a proper sports interview, and frankly it's more welcome than them going through the motions with the sort of cliched sound bites of a wrestling interview or a contract signing that descends into a brawl when one of them pushes the table into the other.
Yeah, I really liked it as well. If memory serves, I'm sure that Bam Bam and Lawrence Taylor did something similar.
Yeah, they did in February, I think. Yeah.
And I remember really liking that. And I think the way they do these ones, just to expand on what Craig was saying, was they feel more like the real person, quote unquote. It's kind of a bad way, but it humanises them a bit more. Of when they're just sat there, it doesn't feel like it's pre-prepared. Obviously, they probably know the way the interview's going to go, obviously, but it just doesn't feel as scripted. It feels more natural, especially on Bret's side, because I think one criticism I have of Bret is his promos always feel like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and then I'm going to win and I'm good. Whereas this, it made Bret just seem a bit more like, oh, okay, Bret, you seem a bit more, just a bit more of what Bret actually is rather than just the hitman character. And the same goes for Diesel again. He sort of alludes to, like Craig says, his weaknesses, and you don't normally get that in sort of like a pre-match promo or a promo that's on a Raw. So I actually really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I mean, not that they often do babyface versus babyface matches. I mean, this is the main example when they did it in January. But I can't often recall a WWF babyface versus babyface match where it's been so much of a, rather than you'll get some matches where they might kind of lean more towards one or the other, or other occasions where they're like, we'll just let the fans cheer both equally. This seems to be built up as we're going to present you two guys, pick who you like. That was it. They had very contrasting kind of opinions, and while they were both good guys, they were both very, critical of each other, I think, in many ways. You can't do this that often. I think it would get quite, routine if you start having these sit-down type interviews every month, but I think the program needed it, the feud needed it, and given that these two have faced off twice in the last 18 months, it made a lot of sense. And we move to the main event. It's Bret Hart against Diesel for the WWF Championship. As the bell rings, Diesel's first move is to remove the turnbuckle pad. Bret turns around and removes his own. It's no DQ, no count out. We start with the pair exchanging blows in the corner. The action spills to the outside. Diesel drops Bret onto the guardrail. Diesel then chokes him against it. Back in the ring, they're exchanging rights, but Diesel is on top. Diesel then slams Hart into the ring steps. Diesel grabs a chair and leathers it into Bret's back. Diesel shakes for a jackknife, but Bret blocks it. Bret bites Diesel's arm, then his forehead. Bret's channeling the Hulk Hogan school of being a babyface. Bret jumps on Diesel's shoulders and works his eye. Bret then works on Diesel's leg before going for a figure four leg lock. Diesel struggles but makes it to the ropes. As it's a no DQ, Bret doesn't have to let go, but eventually does. Bret goes for a sharpshooter, but Diesel pokes him in the eye. Bret goes for it again, but Diesel kicks him off, and Bret hits his head into the exposed turnbuckle. Diesel goes to the corner, but Bret slides out, pulls Diesel into the turnbuckle, and slams his leg into the post twice. Bret gets an electrical cord and ties it to the post, then ties the other end around Diesel's leg. Bret knocks Diesel off his feet and grabs a chair. Diesel manages to knock him off his feet. Bret stands on Diesel's hand and leathers him with the chair before driving it into his leg once, twice, and a third time. Bret climbs to the top. Diesel knocks him off and crotches him before sending him flying across the ring. Diesel finally gets himself free. Diesel hits a sidewalk slam for a 2 count. Diesel slams Bret into the exposed turnbuckle. With Bret hunched over the second rope, Diesel jumps on his shoulders. Diesel picks up Bret, walks him slowly over to the corner and drops him onto a padded turnbuckle. He then goes to do the same on the exposed one, but Bret slits off and drives Diesel's forehead into it. Bret sends Diesel over the top to the outside. Bret goes for a tackle to the outside, but Diesel moves out of the way. Bret climbs on the apron. Diesel charges at him and sends Bret flying through the Spanish announce table. Diesel continues the attack on the outside, and Diesel sends him back into the ring. Diesel signals for the jackknife, but Bret can't hold up his own weight. Diesel attempts to pick him up for a second time. Bret is playing possum. He hits an inside cradle, rolls him up, and wins the match. Diesel sits up, mouths "motherfucker" as Bret's music plays out. Diesel levels some referees and hits 2 jackknife powerbombs on Bret. Diesel gets a chorus of boos as he signals to the crowd. Kieran.
This was so good. It speaks to everything that's good about both wrestlers. Bret does an absolutely amazing job of selling all of the power stuff from Diesel. I mean, Diesel just looks like an absolute beast in this match. I think this is the best he's looked that I've personally seen. This is the best that Diesel's looked in a match. And like I said, that's a lot to do with what Diesel's doing, but more so to do with what Bret's selling the power moves. Bret then does what he does best. He's obviously he's setting up for the sharpshooter, so you get that set up of where he's tying the boot to the post. That was all really good. Everything felt really stiff. They were really laying into each other at points. Like I said, overall, they wrestled such a smart match. Great spot into the table as well. And there I thought, well, Diesel's, they're setting up Diesel to win. And then for Bret to actually go over at the end, I thought was like the perfect result as well. So overall, fabulous match and easily the match of the pay-per-view.
Craig?
Certainly the best match of the evening. It's so obvious that Diesel, with his very obvious limitations, works best when he's, I guess, for want of a better phrase, throwing someone around for a lot of the match. I mean, the idea that he was ever going to get a sort of 5-star classic out of Mabel's ridiculously far-fetched, but when he was taking on people like Hart and Shawn Michaels, someone that could get a little bit of sympathy off being manhandled by him, the matches tended to work. And as Kieran alludes to, this is a great match. It's a little bit plodding at the start if I really am picking flaws in the match, but Diesel looks like a monster, and it's very good. I think it'd have been even better if Hart hadn't spent much of the previous maybe 6 or 7 months languishing in the mid card, taking on various staffers of Jerry the King Lawler. But this was very good. Probably a good 8 out of 10 match, I would say.
Yeah, I'd probably have a hard time explaining why I didn't like it as much as I did, in the sense that I think, objectively, this is quite a good match in the match they laid out. But yeah, Craig, I'd agree. I think it was a little slow. Admittedly, the bit with the chord bit, while clever, I kind of thought it knocked the edge off the match in that it kind of slowed it right down. But I think give Diesel a lot of credit for really doing a good sales job on the leg attack. I mean, we've seen before with guys like Shawn Michaels will take a beating to the leg and then all of a sudden they're starting throwing themselves off ladders doing moonsaults. It kind of takes you out the moment a bit. I thought Diesel did a really good job of once he regained his spot back in the match of really setting that leg and really saying the fact he'd slowed down, which I guess was the story. Again, Kieran, I don't know. It just didn't click with me. I could sit here and tell you why it was a good match, and I don't think I enjoyed it that much.
I totally understand where you're coming from, Bob, because you've gone, if you look at the card overall, you've gone from, some really fast-paced matches, especially the match before, and then this probably does seem quite slow, but I can totally understand where you're coming from, but I just thought that they booked it in a way that sort of, I think it's that old cliche of where you sort of hide the, what's that phrase you say, Bob? Where
the ECWC, you accentuate the positives, you hide the negatives, that kind of thing.
That's the fella, that thing. They sort of did that perfectly, because I think, Bret does all the selling for the power moves. Maybe the setting up of the leg, injuring Diesel's leg maybe went a bit too long. I understand where you're coming from with the pacing totally, but I just really enjoyed the whole setup of the match.
Yeah, I guess I would have liked to have seen more of the power from Diesel. If the story was Diesel's going to try and win it in the first 5-10 minutes, then have Diesel try and win it in the first 5 or 10 minutes. Put Bret in a lot of danger. They didn't really do that. It's not like Diesel spent the first 10 minutes kicking Bret's ass and Bret barely clung on. We got the match didn't really have that opening build. We just dropped into this lull quite quickly. And then, I think from then on it probably worked, but it was if the story was Diesel's only going to win this in the first 10 minutes, then why, tell that story. I'm not saying have him win, I'm just saying get us to a point where you think, oh, Diesel's about to win this, because he's got to. Have Bret kick out of the jackknife, maybe, I don't know.
Or have
No, go on, Ken.
Or maybe have the table spot earlier. Don't sort of have him maybe come out of a jackknife or maybe do that. But maybe what they could have done is have the table spot earlier. So, Diesel's getting desperate. Realises he doesn't fancy going up against a technical wrestler. Have him throw or send Bret through the table earlier in the match to get Bret really, really beat up, and then have Bret come back from that.
Craig?
Sort of difficult to really sort of disagree with any of the points that have been made. I mean, for me the pace was the big issue at the start, but I guess that's just Diesel, and the match is for me quite close to flawless. It's not perfect, but it's all right, and the reasons that it's not completely flawless are Diesel's very obvious limitations. It's not really much I can really add to what you guys have just said.
Craig, what do you think of the finish?
I'm not terribly enamoured by the roll up, which didn't make Hart look particularly strong, and then he was subsequently destroyed post match. So I'm not a massive fan of that, but in terms of how Hart's going to win it, it would seem a bit of a burial if they just went through his traditional 5 moves of doom before finishing off Diesel. So sort of sneak attack sort of plays quite well, considering the whole dynamic of the match was like both of them showed they were faces at times, both of them showed there was an element of heel, so it kind of left everything a little bit up in the air for me, the finish. So it kind of gives them wriggle room. The WWF gives them a little bit of wriggle room for moving on after this.
Yeah, I think the actual finish was quite clever, but I'd agree it didn't it wasn't the strongest start to Bret's new reign, and it didn't. We've had Diesel and Bret 3 times in 18 months. I mean, I'm guessing they'll rematch them at the Rumble. That probably makes sense, and given that you can maybe finish with the Rumble match if you want to, it doesn't have to be that big of a draw, I suppose. But yeah, but I quite like Bret playing possum. I thought that was as well. Kieran, your thoughts on the finish?
Yeah, I didn't mind it because, like I said, throughout the match, they were and the crowd didn't seem really bothered either, which was a big sort of signal as to whether they were doing the quote-unquote right thing or not. But just the way that they were both wrestling, they were, like Craig said, they were doing quite face things. They were sort of like darting between heel and face. So I actually didn't mind it, because what I would have hated, being as how they're going to move forward, would be him having to do a submission and Diesel having to tap out. So if I was going to consider possibly all the finishes they could have done, I'll take this. If Bret's got to be the winner then and take the belt, then I'm not too disappointed with the finish.
Craig, your overall thoughts on this show and a score rating out of 10?
Yeah, I liked it. I loved the first match. As Kieran said earlier on, it might be because of low expectations, but I just thought it was a good opening match to start off any show. A little bit of storyline development there as well. I'd quite like to have seen the women's match get a little bit more time, but it was what it was. There was some good stuff in there, and it obviously storyline wise sets up something coming up next between Aja Kong and Bertha Faye, so that one gets a strong mark as well.
Kong and Blaze, you mean?
What did I say?
Faye. We both made an error on London Blaze tonight.
Yeah, we've both not paying too close attention to women's wrestling.
I feel like my mistake is more understandable. I feel like Blaze and Sunny look fairly similar. But go on, carry on.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Let's just move on, shall we? Goldust Bam Bam was the weakest point, but we've covered that. The Lawler's team against Undertaker again served a strong storyline purpose, because Undertaker came out looking pretty awesome, and he could sort of do with moving on, although quite soon afterwards he seemed to be cast into a feud with Kama Mustafa over an urn, which doesn't bode well for his long-term future. But we're not talking 2 weeks ahead on Raw, we're talking about this show, so that match again gets a positive mark. We've got the wildcard match, which was laden with star power and quirky, and a pretty solid main event. I think this is as I said at the start, a pretty strong card, particularly when sat next to other WWF shows around this point. A lot of storyline advancement coming from this. Really the only one that didn't have it was the one that was packed full of the stars, but I would probably say a safe 7, maybe 7.5 at a push.
Yeah.
Yeah, same really. It there's a couple of matches in there which I really didn't like. I mean, I hated the Bam Bam Goldust. I think the women's match could maybe got a bit more time. Really enjoyed the first match. Really enjoyed the wildcard match. The Taker one did its job. That first match as well. There was, there's a bit of setup. That's what I like to see. Give me a good match, but also give me something to get my teeth into that will make me want to carry on watching past the pay-per-view. And a really, really solid main event. So I'll go 7 out of 10.
Yeah, it's very weird to come out of a WWF show this year and not to have something like really objectionable or really awful to discuss. And I think this show, we come out of it and we say, look, this is probably the least objectionable WWF pay-per-view of 1995. That's not to say it was awful, that's not to say it was brilliant, it was just perhaps the safest. The action was good, you're going to see a good show from start to finish, with probably the exception of Goldust and Bam Bam. Even that's not bad, it's just Bam Bam going through the motions which undercuts it a bit. And yeah, I don't think it ever got above good. But it never got below average, and that's a very rare comment for any wrestling show this year, be it WWF or WCW. I gave it a 6.5 out of 10.
I think in terms of the show as well, from a Survivor Series elimination tag match point of view, if you were to compile a top 5 elimination match from the initial one in 87 through to this one in 95, I think the underdogs match at the start and the faces and heels mixed up together, both of those matches would make that top 5. I'm struggling to think of many matches in that time period, certainly in the Survivor Series aspect.
I can only comment on the ones I've seen, but I still think that the one that involved Diesel last year was phenomenal in many respects. I mean, maybe more so for a bit like The Undertaker, I think, more so for who they got over rather than the action involved, but I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, like, once we get behind kind of 93, I'm flagging a bit, so...
We've got 2 really, really strong Survivor Series matches at the Survivor Series, so yeah.
Razor Ramon phones in during a 1-2-3 Kid vs Hakushi match, opening up Raw on November 20th. Marty Jannetty runs out shortly after, but the referee's holding him back. Later in the match, Ted DiBiase shoves Hakushi off of the top rope and the Kid wins with a spinning kick. During a post-match promo, DiBiase goes Jannetty, who walks back out on the R-way. Sid comes out, rambles some crap on the mic, and he and Kid start attacking Marty. Throughout the show, there are teasing comments from Diesel. We see him backstage at one stage chatting with Shawn Michaels. Diesel then walks out to ringside during a match between Skip and Savio Vega, levels Skip, then demands a microphone. He said he thought he'd apologise for what he did to Bret and what he did to the fans, but then again, maybe not. He said he slept like a baby, and this morning he saw himself smile for the first time in a year. He saw himself, not some corporate puppet that Vince McMahon decided to create. Big Daddy Cool is back. The guy from the 1994 Royal Rumble is back. The main event is Owen Hart versus Shawn Michaels. Michaels sends Owen flying to the outside and starts celebrating in the ring. Then he collapses. Al Hebner starts kicking him as you would do to check a flat tyre. Vince McMahon steps out from the commentary booth, and when we're back from the commercial we see Shawn being attended to by paramedics. No words are spoken, and the show goes off the air with them attempting to get oxygen to him. Ahmed Johnson beats Radford in the opener of the 27th of November Raw. He cuts a promo post-match. Dee Douglas comes out and interrupts it. Vince McMahon is asking whether Shawn Michaels was actually hiding symptoms of post-concussion syndrome following his attack in Syracuse. We get Aja Kong and Tomoko Watanabe against Alundra Blaze and Kyoko Inoue. Surprisingly, Vince McMahon doesn't drown on commentary. The match was surprisingly decent, and Kong lays out Inoue for the win. We get Brother Love interviewing Bret Hart. This segment is pretty awful, but Brother Love does try and convince Bret that he fears The Undertaker. Bret eventually gets a hold of the segment, calls Diesel's actions cheap after the main event of Survivor Series. Bret says his match with Bulldog from SummerSlam 1992 has been on his mind, and Bulldog will find out it's a dog-eat-dog world. Just as the segment seems like it's ending, Bob Backlund comes out of nowhere and locks in the chicken wing on Bret. We're on location with Henry O'Gowan at his farm. He introduces Hunter Hearst Helmsley to his pigs. Vince says they will have a, quote, hog pen match in Your House 5. Also on pay-per-view, Jim Cornette offers up Owen Hart for an open challenge. It's just a shame this show isn't in Canada, eh? Karma comes out for the main event on crutches. Vince McMahon is immediately suspicious. Instead of Karma, DiBiase has paid for So Mo to face The Undertaker. Undertaker disposes of Mo, getting the gold chain that was on his own off of Karma. Then Yokozuna comes out and they square off. Mabel comes out and grabs the chain off of Bearer and legs it up the R-way as we go off the air for November.
Go ahead, King.
You know, I want to take just a second to get a word with the man who has taken the World Wrestling Federation by storm, Mr. Ahmed Johnson. Okay. Now, Dean Douglas has told me a little bit about you, Ahmed. He says that when you graduated from kindergarten, you were so excited you could hardly shave without cutting yourself. That's what Dean Douglas said.
Oh, my goodness.
And Dean Douglas also said that, and in your house, he's going to teach you a lesson.
Let me tell you something real quick. First of all, you better give me some respect. You understand that? Or I'll take you and bump you right in the ring.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Second of all, as far as your buddy Dean Douglas go,
here he comes.
What that thing say to me? Get in my face.
Whoa, wait a minute.
One stinking minute there, big man. I can see the body chiseled from stone, and you certainly look like you got what it takes to become a superstar here in the World Wrestling Federation. But Jerry the King Lawler, you know this to be the truth. The road to superstardom here in the World Wrestling Federation takes place in my classroom.
You wonder who the teacher and who the pupil will be.
What do you got to say about that?
Well, I tell you what then. Ring the bell.
And we will start by discussing, I think, probably the big angle on Raw this month. The end of the 20th of November show. Shawn Michaels facing off against Owen Hart. That match going up against Sting and Hulk Hogan over on TNT, on Nitro. Owen and Shawn wrestled a pretty good match, 7 or 8 minutes. Shawn does his rumble spot, throws Owen to the outside, climbs back into the ring, goes to pose, and then collapses. And the remaining kind of 6-7 minutes of the show, there is very little commentary, there is no action, it's just Shawn being attended to by paramedics, by WWF officials, by Pat Patterson, by Vince McMahon, all things like that. And that's how the show goes off the air. Craig, what do you think of this angle?
It's tasteless, but it was, I don't know if you can say something's tasteless and then say it was done well, but it was done in a very believable fashion, and I think the whole bit about Vince McMahon diving into the ring, Owen Hart bending down to check on Michaels.
But let's not oversell it here. Vince got into the ring. He didn't fling himself at Shawn. He just...
Yeah, He's sort of surprised he didn't, but he came into the ring to check on him, and Owen Hart was hunkered down checking on him. So watching it, you legitimately did believe that something was wrong. So that's a success if that's the point that you want to drive home.
Kieran.
Yeah, similar really. The way Vince reacted. First of all, I was like, well, it's like you know, they've sold it as like being actually legit, and then you see the way that Vince reacts, and I'm like, is it a work? Is it shoot? I mean, it is totally.
Not that anyone in our kind of position believed it, but the big giveaway was the fact they replayed it. That's the general, you know, again, not that anyone that know that would be in a situation to think it was real, because if it was, they wouldn't be showing it. But yeah, the big giveaway of that was the replay.
Yeah, and then obviously where they're trying to sandwich it in. So I suppose I'm just probably similar along the lines of Craig. I mean, it is tasteless and not really like low class thing to do, or you know, angle to do. But in terms of them trying to like get some viewers from possibly maybe watching WCW, then it probably did that. It probably shown a bit more. Drew a few more eyes to WWF than would normally do, so I suppose it did its job, but I didn't really think it was anything great.
Yeah, I'll give them a lot. It was memorable, which is half the battle when it comes to TV these days. I thought that I think we say, was it believable? And I say that the replay proves otherwise. I think other than that, they did a very convincing job of making you think it was real. Certainly a lot of people that watched it, certainly in the arena, thought it was real. You know, we go back to the Royal Rumble with the Bam Bam and Lawrence Taylor angle, and the one thing I praised them for there was that they just apologised for it and they moved on. Like, you know, you can, if you're too over the top about these things, it'll take people out the moment, it'll make people think, you know, this is a story. Whereas given that they played it very low key, I think, on the whole, They did a very good job. My favourite part of it was Earl Hebner, who Shawn Michaels goes down, and nobody's really sure what to do at this point. Owen's kind of thrown him back into the ring.
Kicks his foot.
And Hebner, like someone's checking a car tyre, just kicks him a couple of times. It's like,
I made a note and I forgot to say it. That was hilarious. That should send off signals straight away. And Hebner's like checking it.
That's one way of doing it. But yeah, other than that, I mean, they wanted something to go up against, Hogan and Sting. I think Owen and Shawn is a match that, Shawn's a big enough guy that I think you promote that, people are going to stick around. And the angle stopped people from turning the channel. I would think, that will be borne out in the ratings when they come out. But yeah, I think, probably a box tick. Was it a bit insensitive? Yes. Faking a guy collapsing on TV, and there's also the fact that the following week on Raw they did say, well, maybe Shawn's got post-concussion syndrome from his attack in Syracuse. It's like, well, hello, why the hell is he in the ring then? Like don't say that. Like, that makes you look bad, Vince. Like, Shawn got beaten up by 10 guys and you rushed him back to the ring. Don't say that. Like, I know you want to treat this as real, but there's different ways of presenting things. They got the bulk of it right, but I thought it was an effective angle, and as I say, a good counter to Hogan and Sting on Nitro. Our final part, which is probably quite a long discussion, which is why I kind of left it to the end. Obviously, this ends Diesel's near year-long title reign. And so basically, as part of discussing it and breaking it down, and I've done a similar thing on the website this month as well, as a collective trio, we're going to attempt to rebook it. In a way, sort of, we'll see how this goes. So we'll kind of go chronologically through to discuss, Diesel's matches, his feuds, and his character, how that's kind of evolved over the last 12 months. And I want to start with Diesel's promo from last year. So this is important. This is a clip from last November. We're going to start with Diesel's first promo after winning the title on Raw, and then we'll come to discuss him beating Backlund in a second.
All right, let's take you back to the Survivor Series, if we may. An unbelievable, stellar performance. Single-handedly, almost annihilating everyone else on the other team until Shawn Michaels decides he wants to get into the ring. And, of course, we know what happened after that. I would suggest that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
We know we had a strategy where everybody was going to go in on the Teamsters. We're going to show what we had as a team. Somehow when I got in, Shawn decided I would stay in. And when I started to run out of gas, or should I say diesel, Shawn decided it was time to stay in a little bit longer. I jackknifed Razor Ramon. Now Shawn Michaels wants the tag. And we all know how much Shawn loves the spotlight, don't we?
Oh, yes, we do. We definitely know about that. But he didn't exactly get what he thought he was going to get. As a matter of fact, we last saw him in his automobile getting out of town.
Yeah, I got a message to you, Shawn Michaels, wherever you may be. That is, in Survivor Series, you might have got away. And I tell you, if I would have got my hands on you that night, you wouldn't have survived.
Obviously, you did. You survived, as a matter of fact, since Shawn Michaels decided to dump the tag team championship belt into the trash can. Obviously, there was a disillusionment of the tag team championship combination with you and Shawn Michaels. Therefore, Jack Tunney had to make a decision. With the hitman Bret Hart temporarily out of action, you were named number one contender for your opportunity in Madison Square Garden. Tell us how that felt that day. Describe that day, if you would.
Well, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep. I was scheduled to fly in from Pittsburgh at about 8 o'clock. I took an earlier flight so I could get into the city. I took a cab from LaGuardia into the city and decided I'd walk the streets. I walked the streets of New York City, and a person here and a person there wished me good luck. And as each person came to me and wished me good luck, I felt a little bit better about my chances. And as the day went on, after a couple of hundred people came up to me and said, "Hey, Big Daddy, do the job tonight at the Garden. Bring home the gold, Big Daddy." Well, like Jackie Gleason says, how sweet it is because Big Daddy has got that gold.
Yes, but I would suggest you have not heard the last of the man who is the master of the cross-faced chicken wing, Bob Backlund.
Hey, Bob, now besides those bow ties, which I gotta say are quite stellar, hey, you're a real wrestler, you're a real man, I respect you. If you get the cross-wing chicken on me, hey, it might be trouble for Big D. But you know what, Bob? You gotta get it on me. You gotta get it on me.
Whether or not that can be accomplished, I guess maybe time will tell. The Hitman Bret Hart is watching us tonight, temporarily laid up. As a matter of fact, we had him on the phone a few minutes ago. Any words for the Hitman?
Well, I don't know Bret that well. I did combat with Bret in June at King of the Ring. It was 30 minutes of hell. The man is a great competitor. He was a true champion. I don't like the way Bret Hart's belt was taken from him. Because I think I know, and everybody out there knows, that if they were waiting on Bret Hart to give up on his own, Survivor Series would be going on right now.
I have to agree with you there.
Now, I've been a champion for a few hours, a couple of days. It's all new to me. But if there's one thing I can do, one thing I can emulate from Bret the Hitman Hart, is I want to become, as he was, a fighting champion. Bret never...
Yes, the fightingest champion of all time.
Bret never turned down a challenge. I'm not real proud of the way I got mine, but he didn't turn it down when the time came. And Bret, enjoy that great family you have right now. Enjoy your time off. I'm sorry about the injury, but I'll tell you, as a man with my word and my hand out in front of you, anytime, anywhere, Bret Hart, you want a shot at this belt, brother, you got it. That's a promise from Big D.
All right. Any last words of wisdom?
Let me think. On lives the new generation and the World Wrestling Federation. Yeah!
There you have it, Big Daddy Cool, the new World Wrestling Federation champion.
So, Craig, we're in November of '94. Diesel, Bob Backlund defeats Bret Hart to win the WWF Championship after Bret and Owen's mother throws in the towel, and Backlund wins the title. About 3 days later, on a WWF live event at MSG, Diesel stepping in or subbing in for the Bret Hart, who was selling the effects of the attack from Backlund. Diesel steps into Bret's shoes. Diesel faces Backlund on the show and wins the match in 8 seconds. Jackknife Backlund wins the title. And then Craig, he comes out on Raw and cuts the promo that we've just heard. I think Hogan Light is a very good way of surmising it. What do you think of that opening chapter?
I think it sort of did Bret Hart's future chances not any great benefit in the fact that he toiled against a man that Diesel then defeated in less than 10 seconds. I think it was very obvious though that the rocket was strapped to Diesel's back, so it was a sort of matter of time. And they clearly thought in late 1994 that for a Survivor Series main event that Diesel versus Bret Hart wasn't the thing to do, face versus face, and it was. I mean, with the rocket, the aforementioned rocket strapped to his back, him being portrayed as the sort of the face of the WWF, the corporation's man, if you will, not a terrible surprise at all. This sort of old-fashioned babyface character, I don't think was an exact fit, but it was a sort of natural progression for the character of Diesel.
Kieran?
Yeah, this opening, but I mean, are we going the Backlund stuff?
Yeah.
It's like, why not? Why do that on like? My biggest thing with that is, all other things aside, is why would they not just put that on Raw? If you're going to do like a quick match like that, don't put it on like a house show, because you could make Diesel look really strong in front of like live TV, or against people who are going to be watching Raw. That was my biggest takeaway from that. I don't know what you guys think of that, of the way they did it, because all of a sudden then you hear about Diesel, this guy who's got a rocket strapped to his back, as Craig said. Obviously, that's what they're pushing him to the moon, and then the title change happens at a house show. That was the one thing I just found that so bizarre.
I think there's a point in that though, because house show house shows were obviously are a very big part of WWF business. So they wanting to portray that you've missed out on something. You really need to make sure you're attending this type of show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you really have to go back to the Survivor Series with that Diesel match that I referenced earlier in the show. Like they had him at like breaking point in that segment. They be bubbling up and down all year. We go back to the Royal Rumble in '94 where he had that great showing. He didn't really do a lot of WrestleMania. Then he made events King of the Ring. Then he's in the mid card at SummerSlam. Then he's in the opening match at Survivor Series that has this great showcase against a lot of other named guys. We got out of that show. It's like, right, he's ready. Like, I don't know whether you wait 6 more months, it's any different. And we look at what happened to Lex Luger, and it's like, well, you missed the boat, you might miss the boat. You know what I mean? You missed that first bit, you might be too late. Should it have been on TV? I mean, I guess I could be pedantic and say we'd have to go back and look at their schedule, because Raw's obviously not live every week, and so there's certain elements of would it have been live? I think it would have been, because it was after a pay-per-view. But no, I agree with Craig. When you do a title change at a house show, you remind people that look, we don't do a lot of these, but you never know, which is
that's important. A fair point. That's a fair point. It just felt if there was going to be this like seismic shift to this like new guy, I would have thought it would have been better. But like I said, I take that on board now.
And I think there's also a fact that, as I say, just strike while the iron was hot. Do it as quickly as you can. The match was 8 seconds long. We saw it in its entirety on Raw, the next Raw. And I think there are, I wouldn't disagree. There are other ways they could have done it, but I think this was pretty good. Of all the things I got problems with in the coming year, this wasn't one of them. But Kieran, sorry, that first promo, it maybe, I mean, we did discuss it on the show last year. It maybe didn't look great at the time, but when you look back, it was like, this was a very clear indication of what they wanted Diesel to be, and what they wanted Diesel to be wasn't what got Diesel there. We'll get to this when we listen to and discuss his promo from this month. This wasn't the Big Daddy Cool in 1994. This was something else.
It just appeared very like cynical. They obviously wanted to be. They had a clear idea what they wanted him to be. Nothing to do with what he used to be, and they just said, "This is what you're going to say. It's going to be just very bland, very vanilla." And then you only have to look, you sort of jump way forward, which I know we'll get there, but then you have a look what happens after Survivor Series 95, which we just talked about, and you look at that there, and then you're thinking, if that had been there at the beginning, or sort of, halfway through this run, it would have been so much better. It didn't really do anything.
And Craig, the bizarre thing is that, and I think one thing, again, I don't want to keep saying we'll discuss it in a bit, but we will, is that I think his promos have improved a lot in the last 12 months. And the one thing he would have said this time last year was that, and I talk about the things that made Diesel good and the things that didn't. Diesel wasn't cutting long promos. It's the divergence wasn't just the style of promos he was cutting. It was the fact that his first promo after winning the title was like a 6-7 minute interview in Ring on Raw. And it's like, this wasn't Diesel. It's not like we're talking about comparing it to the promo from this month where it's like, this is this cool, heelish leaning Diesel promo. Diesel 94 didn't say a lot. And then Craig, he comes out and he cuts this really long promo. It was jarring, and I think when you look back, it was the beginning of problems.
I agree 100%. I mean, if the WWF had decided to go with Diesel as being a cool champion, you have no idea what might have happened, how his 95 run as WWF champion might have panned out. But instead, it did almost feel like they were trying to create, another attempt to create a Hulk Hogan type, say your prayers, eat your vitamins type champion, with the sort of soft language, the family friendly language, not sort of maybe realising why previous audiences had shifted away from them and why ratings were so poor. I guess a sort of missed opportunity more than anything.
Yeah, we'll move on in a second. I just think that was a sign of bad things to come. Would be the long story short. But again, one thing that we may or may not get to as we go through the months is that I actually think as much as Diesel stayed in this kind of languid Hogan-like type promos, he got a lot better at them. I think we can say that fairly comfortably. You look at some of his promos from the middle of this year, he got a lot more relaxed into that character. Whether that character was very effective is another story. But I think one thing I kept referencing in 94 was another wooden Diesel promo. We didn't get many of those this year. But we'll move on to January, once Diesel, because the story with Diesel at this point was that Bret Hart had gone away to record a TV series called Lonesome Dove. So I think for the entirety of December he was off television, and off of live events as well. So Diesel was facing Backlund in these house show main events, and as it turns out they were so bad they stopped doing them. Diesel, they switched Backlund out of the matches. They put Diesel in with Jeff Jarrett for the house show runs anyway. And not that they were ever planning Diesel and Backlund for the Royal Rumble, but any hopes of maybe first show in January, let's do Diesel and Backlund on Raw, they were scrapped if they ever existed. So we move on to Bret against Diesel. It was effectively a rematch, if you want to call it. Bret was the former champion. Didn't get his rematch against Backlund because he didn't have the chance. So we moved to Bret against Diesel. But Kieran, we had this problem that we're trying to establish Diesel as a babyface champion, and we're putting him in the ring against someone who's far more popular. The question is could they have avoided this, or was it an inevitability?
As to whether they could definitely have avoided it, what they would have done with what they had at the time, I don't know, because one of my overarching things for the entire run is the lack of heels. But what you could have avoided is don't put him in there with a guy that, like you said, is way more popular. But I just don't think there was a lack of credible heels for me, and I think that was the bigger issue.
Craig.
I think the problem stems from the point I hit on earlier on, the fact that Bret's title reign ended with a bit of a whimper, losing to an elderly Bob Backlund, who then lost the title in very quick fashion to Diesel the next night. So on paper it looked like no real competition. So it didn't seem like a logical fit, but then again, there weren't really many others that jumped out. I mean, cast back to the end of sort of mid-94, you had Owen Hart winning the King of the Ring tournament, but he didn't seem like a terrible natural fit for a long-term progression into the main event picture. So, I mean, without a sort of, other than really The Undertaker, there wasn't really any sort of big name people that Diesel could have faced at the Royal Rumble.
No, I mean, yeah, and plus, as we say, the fact that, you did owe Bret a rematch, you needed a main event for the Rumble. I think they could have avoided it, but it would have been a real awkwardly sharp turn. And so, yeah, they did what they had to do. I mean, they teased tension quite nicely. That, we heard their build up to this Survivor Series match at the beginning of the show, but, Bret and Diesel first faced off at King of the Ring in 94, and that match ended when Diesel jackknifed Bret, and then Jim Neidhart ran out and forced a DQ. So Diesel very much had this thing where we got unfinished business. So it was babyface against babyface, but it was still, there was still a story to it, and the fact that we go into the match and Bret basically just played a heel for most of the match. Did a pretty good job of it, I think, in not not playing a full-on heel, but going far enough where he protected Diesel. There was one point where Bret got booed where he started hitting with a chair. And then that match ended by DQ, but I don't know that I could have done that any differently. I don't know that there's, if there was a big long list of heels, then maybe, but Craig, you mentioned Undertaker, he's a babyface. And the other guy we speak about is Shawn Michaels, who, let's not forget, was a heel at the time. But Shawn wasn't yet in a position, he was about to win the Rumble that same evening, so they were getting him there, but he wasn't in a position where they could have moved him forward. And plus, that would have been an awkward transition, and then you would have left Bret, as you did for most of the rest of the year, you would have left Bret in this kind of lame duck spot. So they had to give Bret a rematch. And I think it was a bit awkward. It wasn't ideal, but they did the best they could with that. I think, Kieran, there's probably one thing that I'd say about that was that, and I think I said this at the time, I would have just had Diesel win. That match ended with Owen Hart running out, Shawn Michaels running out, all of that. I think Bret could have come back from that, and I think Diesel needed that win more than Bret needed to be protected.
Yeah, the outcome of the match was okay with me, but the way they did it, just have him go over, just don't leave any grey areas again. Just have him go over clean and just have a bit of a reset. I mean, you'll make Diesel look a lot stronger, a lot more believable to the crowd, and they'll go, "Whoa, he's beat Bret clean in a really good match," instead of the way that they did it.
And Craig, I come back again to a point I probably made then, which was that if this was Hulk Hogan would not have gone to a double disqualification, no contest with Bret Hart in his first title defence. That's
certainly a very fair point. A very fair point indeed. Whilst you were just chatting there, I took the opportunity to bring up the contestants in the 1995 Royal Rumble.
Oh, good luck with this. Yeah, this is the caliber of guy. This is what you could have won.
Exactly. That's the point. I mean, looking through the list, the only ones that aren't, for want of a better phrase, jobbers are Michaels, Bulldog, Owen Hart, but then that's pushing it. King Kong Bundy's probably the biggest name in the Royal Rumble, but I mean, based on performances a decade previous, and they only lasted 3 minutes in the Rumble, you've got Lex Luger. That's really it. Crush? I don't know. Exactly.
I think the Crush thing could have worked. But
how dreadful would that have been?
Well, we're about to talk about Diesel and Sid, so
yes, no.
But the Crush departed shortly after, has some legal issues going on at the moment. All that, it probably wouldn't have worked anyway. But we're talking about Crush can go, Crush is better than average for a guy of his size. Yes. He would stand opposite Diesel quite well, and I think he's a guy that would have still got heat. I mean, Crush faced Randy Savage at WrestleMania last year. He's a guy they clearly had something for once they turned him. I don't necessarily disagree with the wider point, and Craig, you're quite right. You look through that list, it ain't a great list. It really isn't.
Same goes for the undercard at the Rumble. You've got Jarrett, not really. Erwin R. Shyster, well, you said about that, the better. And you've got Tatanka and Bam Bam. Maybe Bam Bam might have.
Oh, there we go.
Maybe we've finally got to our answer that Bam Bam might have been a better bet.
Well, I don't think Bam Bam would have been a great fit at this stage. One for the fact that they'd already earmarked him to face Lawrence Taylor at WrestleMania, but also in the fact that they needed, Bam Bam against Diesel at the Rumble wouldn't have been half of the draw that Bam Bam against Diesel at the First in Your House would have been. Just in the sense that, Bam Bam would have been 3 months better, 3 months having just feuded with Lawrence Taylor. I think that in this moment, Bret was the right guy. It just kind of had to happen. And then Craig, we come to the other part of the Rumble, which is Shawn Michaels winning the Rumble. You talk about all the contestants in it. Shawn as a heel at the time, he had to win it, I think, didn't he? I don't know anyone else that could have done.
Yeah, exactly. really there was nothing. I mean, I guess if they'd wanted to, they could have had Luger win it, and it sort of, if they'd had faith in him or wanted to give him another chance, that would have been an option. But the fact that, well, he didn't, and they had Shawn Michaels do the sort of from number one entrant to win it thing. I think it was very obvious that the way they were wanting to go with was with Michaels.
Yeah, and Kieran, let's talk of the Shawn Diesel thing. I mean, Shawn was a heel. The big issue they had was that he was a heel, but a little bit like Diesel 3 or 4 months earlier, the crowd were really starting to latch onto him, and he wrestled a style that is very fan-friendly. And Kieran, I never got the feeling that Shawn ever wanted to fight a babyface turn.
No, again, it just all seems a bit... Although they make Shawn Michaels look strong by going from, one to the end in the Rumble, there's just something about it that just, again, it feels like a bit rushed. Maybe they saw that the roster was really lacking at that point, and they needed someone to go up there. It just doesn't feel right. The Shawn Michaels thing just does not feel right at the minute for me. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on why though.
Craig, again, we went through the Rumble bit. I think Shawn was the right winner. But we look at this program with Diesel, Craig, and my biggest disappointment was that, well, one, the fact that Shawn really couldn't give a shit about whether he came across as a heel or a face. Not that, would it have been counterproductive in the fight? Maybe, but they could have tried harder. But I think more the point that Shawn against Diesel, Diesel had been Shawn's bodyguard since the middle of '93. They had about 18 months of storyline, of friendship, all that to work on. And the feud just felt like any other feud. And it felt like, had they have because I mean, they were sort of saying the right thing. Shawn was saying, well, without me, Diesel wouldn't have been anything, which was partly true. Diesel fired back, all that, fair enough. But I felt like they had the right program. Just the volume needed to be turned up a lot more.
I think the stuff that they'd had previously when they were tag champs, costing each other matches at Survivor Series, etc. I thought that whole section was a lot stronger than the program that they had when Diesel was champion and Shawn Michaels was the Rumble winner. And I'm not saying that in a sort of case of when it came to this time around, we'd seen it all before. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when they did it before, it was better.
Kieran?
Yeah. There's so many more ways they could have, done this. Obviously, accentuate the fact that these two guys are obviously maybe close in real life, bring that into it. You alluded, Bob, that Shawn Michaels didn't really give a shit. I mean, did that come across at all in promos at all? Because I haven't seen many of the Shawn Michaels promos. Or is it more to do with the fact of he wasn't willing to do... Oh, I don't want to use the phrase do the job because it's such a sort of marky thing to say. But do you know what I'm saying? I
don't necessarily think it was that. I think it was more that he would rather look after number one than make Diesel look good. And compared to a Bret Hart who, because they both walked into a match against Diesel in consecutive pay-per-views in very similar situations. Alright, Bret was a face, but a very good technical wrestler facing a bigger guy. Shawn was a heel, but a heel that was always had a certain portion of the fan base on his side, given that he was very good and he played quite a cool heel. And he was facing Diesel, a guy who was much bigger, he was the smaller technical guy. But Bret went into his match at the Rumble and said, right, the only way this is going to work is if I play the heel. Shawn went into his match against Diesel, went, right, we're going to have a match, we'll see what happens, I'm going to jump off the turnbuckle, and Bret went into it a lot more selflessly than Shawn did.
I mean, it just smacks of Shawn thinking, say that the Shawn Diesel match had gone sort of a similar way to Survivor Series 95. Does Shawn see that a way that no matter what happens, no matter what the result, he'll look weak because he's been thrown around, he's taken all the power moves and then ends up losing? I think that speaks more to that Shawn's just really worried about looking weak and then also losing favour with the fans.
And the bizarre thing, Craig, is that Shawn as a heel, if he'd have stayed a heel, probably would have had, I mean, he wouldn't have won the title, but, I think equally he wouldn't have won the title if he'd have turned babyface. But if he'd have stayed a heel, he would have had more matches with Diesel and would have had more opportunity at maybe winning the title off him down the line. Shawn not fighting a face turn seems a little bit strange.
Yeah, but when I don't know how much longevity a heel Shawn Michaels has going constantly against a face Diesel though, because you've got one end, you've got the sort of lumbering, if you want, babyface, and the other end you've got the guy that's putting in everything, the high spots, all the action to drag the matches up. So I think there would have been an inevitable face turn regardless even if the feud had played out indeed a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think that much like Bret, it was an inconvenience to do Shawn against Diesel, but and we can be widely critical in the sense that they didn't have other options, but this was the best program. Shawn, like they truncated the Royal Rumble. Shawn was the star. They had to because they didn't have enough star power. That's their own fault. But this was the match that made sense. You had all this backstory. My biggest problem with it was that they didn't use it. We get to the press conference at the beginning of March ahead of WrestleMania, and Shawn's not talking about his long rivalry with Diesel. He's talking about how he's going to try and steal the show. And my bigger question was, why didn't you? This was not a good WrestleMania, and you were in there with Diesel, who couldn't go to a good match. And you managed to transpire not to have a great match. I remember saying at the end of it, I think there's an argument that Bamber and Lawrence Taylor was, on the face of it, probably more enjoyable. But again, we've got the problem, and Craig, 2 matches in a row, Diesel, the big babyface, going up against a smaller babyface and having to do a lot of selling. It just didn't work.
Yeah, it's difficult to disagree with your analysis of their match. What was the best match of the night and the overall shiteness of WrestleMania 11? Yeah, no, I think you've summed it up very accurately in the course of 2 sentences.
And then on the same night, about 20 minutes after, Bam Bam Bigelow faces off against Lawrence Taylor in the main event of WrestleMania 11. Bam Bam Bigelow loses. Bam Bam at this point is still a heel. But over the course of the coming weeks, in the kind of press conference immediately after WrestleMania, Bam Bam talks, quite solemnly about how he's lost and about, he's going to have to take whatever comes from the $1 Million Corporation. I think it's the 3rd week in April on Raw where Bam Bam faces off against Diesel. They have I think by all accounts, a pretty good television match. And after the match, the $1 Million Corporation turn on Bam Bam Bigelow, turning him face. And I think this may have been the biggest mistake of all, because as we said, Diesel, if you're going to have Diesel as a face, he's got to face guys of a similar size, as much as we, be careful what you wish for, Sid, Mabel, etc. If he's going to be a face, it's not believable with him facing, him against Owen Hart as a heel might have been quite a good match. But having a 20-minute main event with Owen Hart dominating for 16 minutes being the smaller heel wouldn't have worked. So you're either in the situation where you turn Diesel, and we'll come to that in a bit as to whether we would have done. But Kieran, Bam Bam Bigelow came out of WrestleMania 11 as a guy who lost to Lawrence Taylor, fair cop, but as a heel who had performed extremely well in the first 3 months. We got of 95. We got a little taste of Bam Bam and Diesel having a good TV main event on Raw, and that, Kieran, should have been their program going forward.
Oh God, this is so annoying. I'll struggle to not go off on one because I'm a massive Bam Bam fan as it is. What an absolute waste. Missed opportunity. Any way you slice it, this should have been the route you go. And like I said, what you do is you have him go up against 2 technical guys. Perfect. So he goes Bret, Shawn. Now you find somebody of a similar size, but who can work. Now the operative word being who can work. Because like you alluded to, Bob, Sid and Mabel, they're not very good. I'll show you that.
Put it politely.
Yeah. Bam Bam. Oh, God. it would have been absolutely. Imagine them doing that sort of sit down promo thing, sort of recreate the Lawrence Taylor Bam Bam interview that they did, and then the Bret Hart and Diesel doing. Oh, this could have been so good if they'd have done it. Real missed opportunity, and I think it's the most glaring thing with the lack of it. It brings it all back to my original point, the overarching thing about the lack of heels, because Bam Bam would have been perfect. He was the right size. He had a different move set. It would have required Diesel to work slightly differently. It would have, every which way you shape it, it would have been the way to go.
Craig on Bam Bam?
Yeah, I like Bam Bam. I don't think quite as much as Kieran, but I agree with the sort of substantive points about the fact that it required different matches from Diesel. It'd have been completely different. I mean, they could have, I don't know, they could have even done it, got to there eventually with having Bam Bam Night 5 King of the Ring as a sort of, that would have made sense. To sort of, you lose to the American footballer at WrestleMania, we'll let you have King of the Ring, big push from there, and that would have rounded off the year quite nicely with a sort of program between a sort of monstrous big guy and Diesel, and instead we're sort of bemoaning the calibre of matches Diesel was having, and equally down on the direction or lack thereof that a babyface happy clappy Bam Bam was going.
Yeah, we don't have time to quite discuss the decline of Bam Bam Bigelow, but yeah, like the minute they turned him face, because the weird thing was, we'll introduce Sid into this story in a minute, but once you turn Bam Bam, you end up with this really odd situation where you've got Diesel, Bam Bam, Shawn, Bret, Undertaker and Razor all on the face side. And then you look over and it's like, okay, we've got Sid, who arrived in February as Shawn Michaels' new bodyguard. I think that's probably the clearest indicator of any that they probably weren't planning for a Shawn face turn, was that they kind of had to awkwardly get out of that Shawn-Sid partnership pretty quickly, which they did the week after WrestleMania. So they shoehorned Sid in with the $1 Million Corporation, which I don't think was an ideal spot either, although it did mean that Sid didn't have to cut long promos. And then beyond Sid, you were like, and this was before kind of Mabel's monster push started happening, and you go, okay, we've got, Backlund, I guess, who's just faced Bret at Mania in a properly awful match, lest we forget that. We've got Owen Hart, I suppose. We've got Yokozuna, who just come back, and I don't know that we'd necessarily want to see Yokozuna and Diesel. But you look down the heel side, and you're like, there's alarm bells here, guys, come on. And so they turning, like, you could have kept Shawn over there. I think he would have been fighting the wind, in all honesty. But Bam Bam as a heel would have made sense. It would have been the perfect program. I can't disagree that him winning King of the Ring would have been a bad idea. I just, basically, I'm trying to avoid getting to Sid and Diesel, which we're going to get to now. But once Sid turned on Shawn and we had all that, we united Shawn and Diesel, but equally we got, and this is the other kicker. If this is 1994, Diesel's next title defense happens at King of the Ring. But it's 95. WWF have just announced they're going to start doing monthly pay-per-views. We've got to find a match for May. We've got to find a match for July. Okay, this is becoming a bit more of a problem. So rather than getting to the first in your house and having Diesel just doing what Diesel should have been doing for the last 3 or 4 months, which is decisively winning big matches, we get to Sid, and because they've got to keep Sid strong for what I think was only going to be 2 shows, but because Sid powerbombed Diesel landed on his elbow and injured his elbow, it ended up being 3 shows because Diesel wasn't fit enough to compete in a singles match at King of the Ring. We not only have to keep Sid strong, Kieran, we then end up with effectively 3 Sid and Diesel matches with 2 with a tag match in the middle.
Lucky us.
Oh yeah.
My God. It's just, why on, I can see why, because you put it on a poster and it's Sid, Diesel, 2 huge guys in size, but we've alluded earlier that Diesel's quite limited. Well, I mean, if Diesel's limited, what the hell is Sid? He's just terrible, and putting these 2 guys together while visually, before the match starts, or, when you're setting up the feud to come or whatever, it probably looks quite good. And then the minute they start wrestling, it just descends into absolute shite.
Yeah, it really does. We talk about the lack of heel depth. Who did Sid team with at King of the Ring? Tatanka. That was it. I mean, Craig, this feud was just awful. I mean, there was no compelling story to it. There was never ever really a belief that Diesel was in jeopardy. And the match quality got worse. That was a fascinating thing. Like, the peak was in your house, the first one. It just went downhill.
You're right. You would have expected this to be shite at the start. You'd have expected some sort of improvement. And you know, the craziest thing is, see if you were sitting in creative and it was like, right, we'll go with Diesel and Sid. Why is no one being like, Vince, are you sure this might not be a little bit lumbering in places? But there just seem to be no checks and balance to stop two guys with very limited mobility and a handful at best of moves between them having a reasonably lengthy program at the top of cards. Baffling.
And they didn't even have big man matches. Like, these were bad matches with a lot of submissions and a lot of groundwork and a lot of quite clunky stuff. Like, I spoke to it last month when I spoke about Diesel and Bulldog. It's like, fine if they'd have gone out there and had a walking brawl. It might have been fun. It might not necessarily have been brilliant, but it might have been an interesting watch. Diesel was trying to mat wrestle Sid. It's like, why? Like, I don't know. It just...
I mean, even like you said, what was the... did they do like a lumberjack thing?
Yeah, that was the third match, I think.
Was that the third one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So even with that, even when you throw in loads of people around the ring and all the different ways and the different things you can do that, it's still shit. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Craig, was there any justification for lining up a Diesel heel turn at this stage? Say, no. May, June time?
No, because it wasn't working. I mean, the ratings, buy rates at house shows, buy rates of events.
What were they, just out of interest, Craig? What were they? Did they plummet? Was it sort of like, almost like a nosedive when it got to Sid?
It's difficult to say because, well, I mean, house show attendances were down. But they've hardly been that healthy for a while. The pay-per-view numbers are difficult in the sense that we're dealing with new shows. So it's difficult to compare year on year in the, not only does In Your House doesn't have anything to compare it to, but equally King of the Ring last year happened with no pay-per-view before it and no pay-per-view after it. So it's difficult to compare those, and then we did, the weird kicker in amongst all this, and amongst all the shite surrounding, WWF in 1995, TV numbers were quite good. That's the thing that people forget. You look at, when they promoted big matches, Diesel and Bam Bam did a good number on Raw. Undertaker and Jeff Jarrett about 5 weeks later did a good number on Raw. TV ratings were belying all of the other numbers that were going the other way. But that was, if Diesel and Bam Bam draw in the TV segment, then that's a good sign. We can't take that away from him. But yeah, I would say it was mixed. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I'm sure if we had Dave Meltzer on, I'd be able to talk to a lot more metrics that I've memorised and haven't read. But yeah, I think it was mixed, but equally it's like house show attendances are down, and traditionally you say when they're down, it's the guy on top. So yeah, it didn't necessarily reflect that well on him. Go on, Craig, carry on.
What I was going to say is, I mean, I wasn't going to apportion all of the blame onto Diesel. I mean, I do understand the point you just raised there, but Bob on top has to take some of the blame. But I mean, it was a different sort of. There were obviously various issues, but what I was going to suggest was that you'd think at one point it'd be like, right, for whatever reason things aren't working, we need to freshen things up and turning Diesel back to being a heel after his previous success as a heel, considering how loaded as we've previously alluded to, the sort of babyface side of the promotion was, seems startlingly obvious.
Kieran?
Yeah. Just I think, again, my two overarching things, I know I've said before about the lack of heels, but also I've come to this and I've come to realise that you can't really put all the blame, like Craig says, you just can't put all the blame on Diesel. Whereas before, when I sort of look at it sort of individually, I look at a guy like Diesel and what he's doing, he doesn't appear to be doing anything, but with what he's given, what more can I expect from the guy? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's that point is encapsulated within the Sid feud. It's like I tend to before I sort of looked at it as a whole, I tend to portion a lot of the blame, wrongly now I think, on Diesel, because he's the champion. He should be trying to, push everything. But at the same time, if they're not giving him worthy opponents who aren't built up to begin with, what is the guy going to do, Bob? What's he got to do? He's got nothing to work with.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that. Okay, all right. The pay-per-view decision came, I think, March was when they decided they were going to open up the taps. I can't think who came first. So I think it was WCW who announced it first, and WWF followed suit about 3 weeks later. And you would think at that point, it's like, okay, we've now got to do, because before they announced it, after WrestleMania, there was 3 pay-per-views for the end of the year. After they announced it, all of a sudden there's like 8. So it's like, okay, we now need quite a lot of opponents for Diesel, because if you're gonna try, because this is the thing, like, if you're gonna make Diesel Hogan, make him Hogan. Like do what you did with Hogan. Build a lot of guys up, have Diesel beat them, then build the next guy up, have Diesel beat them. And you could have almost have done 8 consecutive shows with Diesel as champion and just had him face a different guy each time. It would have been a little clunky, but you know what? I think Diesel would have been quite well off come the end of the year. Admittedly, you would have thrown a lot of name opponents into awkward situations, and but I think you'd have had a very over Diesel with a kind of heel roster that's a bit wobbly. But you would think, okay, it's March, we've got 8 pay-per-views. Let's start building a list of opponents for Diesel so that it doesn't feel quite so clunky when we've got to just push Mabel into that spot month by month. And they didn't do that. And it's like, I look at, if you turn Diesel in June, you open up him against Shawn again, with Shawn as the babyface, him as the heel. You can do the Diesel and Bret rematch. You can do Diesel and Undertaker. You can do Diesel and Razor. You can do all of these matches. Or, your other option, you keep him as a babyface and you say, right, we've got to stack the heel roster. We turn Razor. We keep Bamber as a heel. We work out wherever we left Owen Hart and push him again. We take you probably don't need Bill Backlund, they tried that, it didn't work. We go with Jeff Jarrett, a guy who, as we saw, who was the guy who filled in for him who had a match with him for the title, I think in February on Raw, and filled in for Backlund in December on the house shows. You start going, okay, we need a conveyor belt of heels to face Diesel over the next 6 months. And they didn't do that. And, we went out with 3 matches against Sid. They went with Mabel, wrongly. We'll come to that in a second. And then they decided mid-August, shit, we've got to turn Bulldog, we didn't do opponents. So they turned him, and 3 weeks later, a couple of months later, he was facing him. It's like, They didn't look prepared. At least if they had a plan, at least if they executed a plan and it was bad, I would go, okay, this was the idea, it didn't work. Craig, I'm not even sure they had a plan.
No, you're right. Just to come in on your point, I mean, you're talking about being in March. I mean, there's no reason that you couldn't take, I don't know, someone like Adam Bomb, have him destroy a couple of jobbers, just strap a rocket to his back for a little bit. June, July, in a decent place. He doesn't look totally out of the picture. Diesel beats him. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And if Adam Bomb's starting to actually look quite decent, then I don't know, give him the Intercontinental title run. Just sort of go with something. But you either got the impression that they didn't have a plan, or they didn't really want to take a risk, which both just seem utterly crazy. It's like there's nothing wrong with trying different things with different guys, but they just seemed unwilling or unable to do that.
But crucially, Craig, they had one plan. That plan came in the form of Mabel.
Yes.
Go on, Craig.
it shows the weaknesses of your plan Bs and your plan Cs, if that is your A plan, doesn't it? I mean, we all know the sort of, if you want, McMahon's fetish for big guys, but it used to be sort of muscle-bound guys, not morbidly obese rapper guys. So no, it was... At
least he's not on steroids. There's no debate. There's no middle ground. There's no suspicion. That's the one positive.
Are you sure, Bob?
Oh,
I think we should rule out lengthy stints in the gym for Mabel.
Yeah. I'd consult a different doctor if Mabel's on steroids. Carry on, Craig.
I think if Mabel's on steroids, he's also forgetting to combine that with doing arm curls. Yeah, no, you're right. That plan is awful. Again, I mean, I can just repeat what I said. You'd hope someone be like, hold on, Vince, aren't these matches going to be quite lumbering? Or in the case of Mabel versus Diesel, almost like two dead people trying to wrestle. It's just, you're not going to expect anything akin to a sort of high impact match. And it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, Bret Hart made sense in '93 after what happened at WrestleMania 9. Because of the family feud, Owen Hart was a logical next King of the Ring winner. But I just don't understand the sort of logic that you take a sort of guy that was languished in a tag team that folk had spent, let's be honest, about at least 12 months not really caring about, and thinking he might be the logical next jump up. Why not give it to Razor Ramon? Why not, I don't know, use it to sort of elevate a star? Because, I mean, whilst Owen Hart had been there or thereabouts in '94, he was never a main eventer. I mean, if you did Razor Ramon winning '95 King of the Ring, that would have been a step up from Owen the previous year in terms of card position at the time, but it was just, it's difficult to work out any logic. And if you factor in the click stuff backstage, the idea of Razor versus Diesel in main event pictures, it sort of seems like a sort of logical move for that grouping as well.
Yeah, if that group was had as much pull as the reports this month suggest, you would figure that Diesel might be able to throw his friend a bone, but apparently not. So Kieran, we get to King of the Ring, SummerSlam rather. It's Diesel and Mabel, and as much as I said at the top of the show, I probably enjoyed SummerSlam more than Survivor Series. I think I did. And as much as I think any pair of people would have struggled to follow Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon in the ladder match, nobody should have been made to do that. That match should have gone on last. Not like there isn't a precedent for that in '94. As much as all that being the case, Diesel and Mabel went out there for about 10 minutes and they stunk up the joint in a surprise to absolutely nobody.
We've literally just talked about the Sid thing. So they must have seen how utterly shit the Sid Diesel thing was, right? They must have seen it, unless they were...
Three times!
3 times it's like, shitter. So I tell you what we'll do, we'll throw up again, we'll just book something that we know is going to be shit, and we'll do it again. Like Craig says, there's nobody, I know obviously we know what kind of character Vince McMahon is, right? We all know that he's, verging on sort of like a dictatorship probably when it comes to creative choices, but surely somebody must have put their hand up and gone, hey Vince, I think if you put Diesel up against this fat bloke, it's going to be utter horsewank. Somebody must have said something, but I just think Vince was just like, no, I'm going to put up Diesel against these huge guys and he's just going to go out steamroller over them, which is fine. And like you said, Bob, it's fine if you do the Hogan thing where you feed him the monster. You feed him an earthquake, which they could have done. If they'd have done sort of like built Mabel up as like another sort of earthquake. I know he can't, sort of move or wrestle like Earthquake did, whatever that was. But they could have done that sort of thing. So keep feeding Diesel the monsters. But no, they just give these guys no build. They put them up against Diesel and lo and behold, it's rubbish.
I think the only reason that creative can logically get to Diesel versus King Mabel is if they're sitting around there and they're talking about Diesel versus Sid and thinking, here, that was that was alright, but for me, I thought it was too fast paced. How do we take some of the pace out of this? If that's the thought process, that's alarming. But honestly, that's the only way you can actually make that jump, though, isn't it?
Somebody probably said that in 1995, bro. I can believe that somebody said that.
We need to remove some of the one or two attributes of pace from this match.
And it was just a horrendous match. I mean, that moment where just Mabel just sits on Diesel's spine. It's just like, I mean, it was kind of horrible to watch. And then, Mabel starts blowing up. Of course he does. And mercifully it's one and done. And there's some stories
will do that to you.
Well, that's true. And there's some stories backstage about how, Diesel was pretty pissed off that, Mabel tried to paralyze him, which I guess is fair enough. And of course they decided, well, alright, we'll give up on Mabel, I know, we'll put him with Undertaker, of course, but that's not for this one. Anyway, the week before this match happened on Raw, they turned Bulldog. And again, as they talk about them not planning ahead, now, alright, in September we had Diesel and Shawn against Owen and Yoko in the tag schmoz that us three reviewed. But before that, I think, Craig, that's the big sign that they just weren't really planning ahead, was that they just turned Bulldog on about 5 minutes notice, and then all of a sudden Bulldog's facing Diesel, and it's like, where's the build? Where's the story? I know I talked about them turning people, but it's like Bulldog should have been careering up the right-hand side for the last 3 or 4 months as a heel, like bearing in on the championships to create this big match. Instead, you just went, Bulldog's, right, we worked out we needed an opponent, we've turned probably the 8th best option.
Yeah, he's not doing anything, let's turn him heel and folk will care. There is no sort of long-term plan. It was almost like the end point was getting the title on Diesel, and then there was a sharp realisation that shite, there's actually more beyond this, and we have nothing planned. I still can't look beyond the idea of just giving some mid-card heel a push for a winning streak on Raw for a couple of weeks, demolish some mid-carder that no one cares about, like Bob Holly on a pay-per-view, and then you can legitimately start to be like, person's starting to be quite strong, and then it leads to a match versus Diesel that can't be as shit as Mabel or Sid Justice, and everyone seems a little bit happier with things. But you're right, no long-term planning, and just a distinct lack of talent, and that hampered Diesel's reign, and clearly had more of an adverse effect on reign and drawing power, etc., than Diesel himself.
Kieran, was there any saving it at the beginning of September, or were we kind of heading toward an inevitable doom?
It just smacked, the whole thing just smacks of inevitability, because they could have seen what the roster was like at that point, and at that point they needed to start doing something. To start trying to turn people now in all seriousness is an absolute joke. It is an absolute joke, and like I said, it goes back to my point of, I've completely done a 180, and I actually really think Diesel was really hard done by throughout this whole run, just given nobody, and then if he's given somebody that's even a half decent wrestler, it's a Bulldog that they turn at a minute's notice. So there's really, when you look at it that way, an established heel is people that can't wrestle. If there's people that he can wrestle, such as like a Bulldog, they have to be turned at the last minute, and there's no build to it at all. So it's just very inevitable in the end, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, like a lot of the damage is already done. They brought in a Dean Douglas, and we've kind of been through that. And I don't know that Shane Douglas would have been the answer. I think he would have been far more entertaining, but I don't know whether the match quality would have picked up. Certainly with a guy Douglas's size as a heel going up against a guy of Diesel's size as a face, you would have run into very similar problems with Shawn and Bret, just with half the wrestler. But I don't know that, I don't know what you could have done. I mean, they had this whole, they had the whole triple header thing. Maybe if they were really, I don't know about panicking, but maybe if they just wanted to turn left, like, maybe if you don't build up to it, you just have a snap change. Maybe Yokozuna pins Diesel. Not that I think you want to give Yokozuna the title. You can just create, I don't know, just create this element of chaos for a few months.
Just do something. I think what you're getting to, Bob, is just do something.
Maybe at this stage, the best way to save him would have been to take the title off of him abruptly with, maybe give it to Owen, even if it doesn't make sense, because then you can kind of do what they did with Bret to Backlund. Give it to Owen. Owen can then lose it to Bret, and then we can work out this mess with Diesel, having not really truly lost the title in a way that was definitive or meaningful, and then we can relaunch him rather than what they did do, which was kind of just, let him just career into a wall. It was just like they weren't smart enough to realise their faults, and I think by the time they realised it, Craig, which was probably the bit where Vince McMahon takes off his headset at the end of In Your House 4 and shouts horrible, mouths horrible, by the time they realised it, it was probably too late.
Yep, too stubborn. It's almost a case of, you almost get the impression that it's like Vince McMahon's like, God damn it, this guy is going to be the next big thing, and I'm just going to stick with him. And as the months progress, where there's so little, he's been fed absolute rubbish. It's like a striker getting no delivery for him and blaming the striker for not being able to score goals. It's almost like that. If you don't give him anything decent, then you can't really expect anything decent from him. And just they left it too late to change things, and by the end it was just inevitable. The most inevitable thing in the world that at Survivor Series, you took a guy like Bret Hart that, like I said earlier, had been languishing in the mid card. Off the top of my head, I can't even remember what made him earn his title shot. But let's be honest, we're kind of relieved that it was Bret Hart back in the picture, and going forward, it's going to be stable. Bret Hart's like a safe pair of hands more than someone that's going to revolutionise things.
Bret Hart is the Ric Flair of the 1990s, isn't he? He's the guy that we go back to when our latest crazy idea doesn't work.
Exactly right. Well, we tried that guy that's a trucker apparently, and that didn't work. So let's give it back to Bret Hart.
It takes them like 3/4 of a year to get to that point.
Yes.
Whereas if they take the belt off him a bit, like Bob said, if they take the belt off him a bit earlier, they maybe give themselves, they turn Diesel himself at that point. Maybe not do it earlier on, but to do it at that point.
And Diesel is obviously with something to say. He left the arena at the Survivor Series.
A lot of people are probably wondering where Big Daddy Cool's head's at right now.
I'd like to know.
I thought about it, and I thought maybe I'd come out here and apologize for what I did to Bret, and for what I did to all my dear fans.
Who needs them?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Last night when I went back to my hotel room, I wondered if I'd be able to get any sleep. For the first time in a year, I slept like a baby. When I woke up this morning and I looked in the mirror, you know what I saw? I saw a smile on my face. It's the first time I saw myself smile in a year. Because I saw myself, not some corporate puppet that you decided to create, Vince. No.
Oh.
You missed the ball on this one, baby. You missed the ball. After I won the title, 24 hours later, I'm up in Titan Tower with the marketing suits, the merchandising suits. Hey, Diesel, we need you to smile a little bit. We need you to be a little bit more politically correct. a little bit more corporate. Well, baby, what you saw last night was the tip of the iceberg. Big Daddy Cool's back. That same guy you saw in Providence at the Royal Rumble a couple of years ago. The only thing that matters to me right now is my family, my friends. That includes you, Shawn Michaels. And I'm not saying something. I'm not saying I'm not going to smack hands. But it better have a black glove on it, baby, because I know you're with me. Whether you like me, love me, or hate me, hey, that's the way it's going to be. I'm back.
And then Craig, after he loses the title, he comes out on Raw, interferes or interrupts the match, including bodied on a skip, grabs the microphone, cuts the promo we just listened to, and it's like, this is the guy, remember? It's like, where have you been?
This is what could have been. Let's be honest, that if that's what it is, that's the sort of cool champion that Diesel could have been. Could have been sure, it might not have sort of had kids flocking to the merchandise stalls to buy Diesel t-shirts, but it'd have been the guy for the sort of teenage audience that they can relate to, rather than the sort of, you know, say your prayers type babyface. That's what it could have been. It could have been the edgy kind of rock and roll star looking WWF champion that a more adult audience could have started to take to, rather than trying to create a kid-friendly babyface action hero.
And Kieran, I think it's probably safe to say there was a fair bit of Kevin Nash in that promo. I don't know that he would have had, one, the ability, or two, the motivation to cut that kind of promo a year ago.
Yeah, it's exactly, as soon as he started talking, I actually felt like it was shoot. I actually felt like he'd gone out there off his own back. And like with some of the things on the pay-per-view we just reviewed, refreshing. It was just so good to see him back to that character. It immediately put, you could see like, Vince McMahon's obviously like acting to some degree, but it instantly puts people on edge because he comes out there and this character just exudes so much more confidence. He's so much more comfortable in this kind of character, in these shoes, that going forward, I just hope that they run the course with this.
Craig, what do you do going forward?
The point Kieran just made there about the hope for Kevin Nash is this: is it not just come too late though? I mean, it does seem a little bit sort of that it's going to just be too little, too late for the Diesel character. I think absolutely it is the best way forward. It's also probably the only way forward, but I just don't envisage him being able to be thrust back into the main event and being seen as a serious player after a very, very tedious, although not entirely all his own fault, run as WWF champion.
And if we look at recent history with Lex Luger, who admittedly didn't win the title, and Bam Bigelow, if one thing shows us anything is that Vince McMahon can put a guy as high on the card as he likes. The minute he gives up on them, they can fall very, very quickly. And like,
that's,
you know, there's the phrase, you know, the bigger they are, the further they've got to fall. Like, you almost feel like if Vince McMahon, I don't think Vince McMahon could afford to give up on Diesel. And I don't know, Kieran, does he go on as a heel now or as a face? I don't really.
I actually think he should flip between the two. And the way I would do it is, he rebels against the company. So he becomes anti-company. You can have him sort of do heelish things, but still remain sort of a face. Just have him completely rebel against the Diesel character. Have him go out there as Kevin Nash is how I would do it. Now, I don't think Vince would ever do that because he obviously likes things that the things that he creates is the things he sticks with no matter what. So going forward, I think it's just going to completely capitulate and fall by the wayside no matter what Diesel does. But for me, what I would do going forward is I would have Diesel completely rebel against the character, against creative, against Vince, and go out there and just say, I'm Kevin Nash now. This is who I am. I'm back to Big Daddy Cool, and this is it going forward.
Craig?
Yeah, I think that's really all that can be done to sort of salvage the character. I don't think it can be a character that's a main eventer. I don't think it's a character that can be a champion, but it can certainly be there or thereabouts. But I just think it's too damaged after a title run that he will be largely blamed for. And I think your point, Bob's probably right as well. We've seen what happens when Vince loses interest in someone, and we can't imagine it's a great period for Kevin Nash with that on his mind.
Yeah, I'd turn him. The issues with the roster aren't any different now, particularly than they were 3 or 4 months ago. It is too late in a way, but it's like, well, Bret's going to run through a Bulldog next month. He's going to need an opponent at the Royal Rumble, probably going to be Diesel. If Shawn's going to win the title at WrestleMania next year, Shawn's going to need an opponent once he's rematched Bret. I think they owe it to themselves to keep Diesel strong so they can put him in that position. And then maybe finally we can get Diesel as a heel against Shawn as a face, working off their history. Like that actually could be quite a big matchup, but who knows? One final question, gents. We've gone much longer on this topic than I expected. Craig, as a ratio, as a percentage, how much of this blame lies with Kevin Nash and how much of this blame lies with Vince McMahon and the WWF?
Oh God, there's a question. I think it's more to do with the WWF because he could only face the people who were chosen to face him. So I would probably argue 70-30.
Kieran?
I would see. I've gone completely 180, and I would probably go 60-40 in favour of the WWF, and then like 40 with Kevin Nash.
I'd probably say 80-20. The early stuff with Bret and Shawn isn't ideal, but I kind of think you have to go there. The big complaint is what comes after that. He came out of WrestleMania in fairly decent shape. We can pick some holes and some questions into what they did before, but I can kind of justify everything they did before Mania. Like, he probably should have beaten Bret, but I know why he didn't. And it's like, fine. He had to face Shawn, but they needed more on that match. And then after that, they should have had a long list of heels to face. And when that failed, they should have turned him, and they didn't. And it's like, in amongst all this, I think Diesel improved a lot on the mic. Whether he improved in the ring, it's very difficult to say, because they put him with progressively inferior opponents. And we come to the end of this discussion, and it's like, the future's uncertain. In terms of, as I say, the real alarming fact is that once Vince gave up on Lex Luger fell far further than he should have done. Vince McMahon, on the history of the stuff we've done, does not sit very well with, once he's given up on a guy, it's not like, okay, Luger's not going to main event, but we'll keep him as the number 3 babyface. We'll keep him pretty strong. He can be the guy that heels beat on their way to Bret. Luger fell quickly. Luger fell into irrelevance quite quickly. He fell into opening tag team act with the Bulldog at the beginning of 95. Bam Bam Bigelow went from WrestleMania main eventer to upper card enhancement talent in the middle of the year to lower card enhancement talent to don't really give a fuck. In 7 months, having headline WrestleMania, it's like, that's a fast fall. If those two can fall that quickly, and right, Diesel was champion for a year, but he's got a lot further to fall. Equally, it will be a lot more noticeable. I think that's probably the way to end it. Anyway, we ran over an hour on that discussion along with the rest. It's been a long show. I'd like to thank firstly Kieran Mitchell.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem at all. Kieran, you are on Twitter.
I am at JotunThrash666.
And Craig Wilson.
Pleasure was all mine. I love the 1995 Survivor Series, hence my insistence on getting the last word.
Yes, indeed. Craig, you are on Twitter and you also have your wrestling website, Plug Away.
I do indeed. You can find mine and my Slights of My Pals discussions on wrestling from a reasonably large standpoint of a vintage perception. So obvious overlap for some of the listeners here, and you'll find that at ringthedamnbell.wordpress.com, and you can find the blog's Twitter feed, which is just twitter.com/ringthedamnbell, but the final L is replaced by a 1 because some rotter has already registered Ring the Damn Bell.
There we go. Craig is never going to be not bitter about that, but that's more power to him. Anyway, yes, you've got 2 more volumes of the show coming up, and volume 2 is WCW. We're looking at the World War III pay-per-view. Volume 3 is all your ECW action, quite an interesting November to remember there. You can find all of the information released on wrestling20rs.com, facebook.com/wrestling20rs, with Twitter at wrestling20rs. That's about it, really. iTunes is on the website, RSS is on the website. You can subscribe to the email newsletter on there as well, and I think that's about it. So I've been Bob Bamber. This has been the WWF Volume 1 part of the November 1995 edition of the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. And until next time, goodbye.